Welcome to a special edition of the Threshing Floor Podcast. Let us introduce you to the game of redemption and its community of players, one conversation at a time. From roundtable discussions to one-on-one interviews and everything in between, we will make you feel more connected to the game than ever before. So, thanks for joining, and let the conversation begin.
Welcome into episode number 95 of the Threshing Floor Podcast. We're here with Justin, the Guardian Alstad. I think this is your third official time on the podcast because there was Mr. Classic weigh in and then Guardian of the Fortress, and now you're back. So how you doing, Justin?
Pretty good. Yeah, happy to be back. Happy that the podcast has returned once again, and glad I can jump in and kind of fill in for Jake here for this episode.
Yep, we're definitely glad that it has returned. I think it's been I talked about mixed feelings on the last episode, but I think it's also mixed feelings of like coming back to it because I'm starting to get a little excited about the game, but still trying to make sure I focus on, illuminating the issues that I had so that we can work on solutions and things. But it's kind of a whirlwind of excitement and stuff. And episode 95, we're pushing towards episode 100. And with that, I shared earlier on Discord your fancy card. How do you like that card? Is it cringe looking at it?
I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. Like, I guess I'll have to see the rest of them. I know you showed me a sneak peek of a few others, but might have to see the entire set to truly appreciate all of those. But yeah, it's cool. I've definitely enjoyed hosting the fantasy draft that we've done the past couple of years. That's been a lot of fun getting to do that, and yeah, looking forward to doing it again for this Nationals.
Since we got a card printed, you have to do it this Nationals as well. So you can't get out of it at this point.
I guess I'm kind of locked in now. Got the own card. Are any of these going to be foil versions? I'm curious.
Well, I don't want to.
Or is that gonna?
So here's I'll give you this little bit of information.
Okay.
I think I'm targeting potentially there's 12 cards, and initially I was like, how many? Assuming that naturally it almost begs for you to have an equal number so that each one can be part of a set.
Mm-hmm.
But since we're not giving them out or selling them as a set, the way that they're going to be distributed is that Andy's going to get them. I'm going to initially get them, then I'm going to pass them off to him, and he's just going to do them as incentives, just throwing them in with orders based on however he chooses to distribute them. It was a way for me I wanted to do something to commemorate, I guess, the 100th episode, or the fact that we finally reached 100 episodes, because we were on pace for 100 episodes after just 2 years, but it's taken nearly, 4.5 years now to get there because of all of the breaks in recording. But every time we step away, we come back to it, and it's kind of a cool thing that it's kind of lasted different transitions of life for different people. Brad being part of it, stepping away, John being the original sponsor to help us with the hosting fees and things. And now Andy doing that with Your Turn Games. And so as a way to just commemorate the podcast, but also let him use it and be the point of distribution so that he can use it to, I don't know necessarily if it's going to boost sales a lot, but at least I can take solace in the hope that it might help him with sales. So I can say, hey, thanks for sponsoring the podcast. Maybe we help you with sales.
Yeah, no, it's a fun incentive, and something to get out in the community, maybe encourage a little more trading, a little more, interaction from that perspective. Like, looking at even with the fundraiser cards, a few of us had talked about, it sounds like pretty much everyone got the matching set, with their number. But if in the future, there's a mixed set, to kind of encourage trading, if everyone kind of gets a random number, just, I think it's good to encourage things like that. And I think that could definitely be something that, people might put in a few more orders, even if they're smaller, just to try and get, either a full set or, the one that they want, or they can at least, get one to trade someone else for one. So,
but yeah, with these, I had 12 designs, and initially, even when I showed it to you, I had like a basic version and then a borderless version. And my idea was that was going to be like the common version and then the rare version. But I don't want to get caught up and assume that people are going to want to necessarily throw these in their binder or anything. I think the more likely outcome is that if they feature a prominent person, like you're on one, obviously we shared that one, someone might, hey, will you sign my card? And it kind of like the player created cards, you know, and then that kind of almost encourages some face-to-face interaction or whatever, reaching out and talking to people, which is kind of cool. Fellowship, that's one of the pillars of the game and what it's built on. Not to get it confused with competitive side of the game just yet, but
we'll get there. We'll get there.
We will get there. So anyway, I added up and I was like, well, if I come up with a certain number and then double that for the two different versions, it ends up being, and it was crazy. And I didn't want to put a lot of work into like creating a lot of work for Andy to distribute them and things. So I think I'm going to shoot for potentially like 20, 25 of each or so. And there's 12 of them. So then still end up with a healthy amount. The test batch, so I've sent it off and it's in processing right now, the test batch with the company that we're using to print the cards. That one is ordered in foil and I ordered in sets of 3. So, and this is why there's 3 of each, is I intended to each one that features a person. So spoil it, since you asked the question, I'm gonna spoil it for you. I was planning on, you know, if they turn out well, if they're not like cut in half or whatever, because I wanted to make sure the dimensions were good before I ordered the full bat. So as long as they look decent, I planned on giving each person that is featured with their likeness a copy of it, just as a cool memento. And then I wanted to keep a set for myself, just out of personal greed, I guess. And so that leaves a couple of copies of some and 1 copy of at least every one. And I figured I'd throw those in with what I sent to Andy and he could just randomly sprinkle those, assuming that they're printed right. So there might be a chance for a more quote unquote rare version, but I wasn't going out of my way to create that, because I mean, if you do that and then the demand's not there, then it's like
then it feels a little bad.
Yeah. So, but hey, somebody brought up thoughts from Portland on the Discord today, so nothing can feel as bad as sorry, John.
I'm not sure I even ever, like, I don't think I was around during that era of the podcast. Yeah, so.
I think it coincided because I think it was done by the time Iowa Nationals came around, and I think that was your first like event back.
Yep.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah, I had taken a few years where I hadn't been as involved, kind of a little bit during, maybe like post-COVID. I was actually looking back at some of my emails, and it's like I remember doing some tournaments during COVID, and we were talking to people about like, we'll be, we'll be safe. We'll, make sure we're washing our hands and, wearing a mask if you feel like you need to do that. And then after that, I think it was kind of, obviously with all that going on, we just, our group kind of took a break for a little bit. Yep. And then we came back a few years later. So yeah, lots of stuff, but yeah, I'm happy to be kind of back in and, not probably as involved as I was like when I was on the elder team and helping with the design stuff, but trying to be involved online, trying to kind of build a play group, which we've had some decent success with that this year for Minnesota, and trying to get some games in when I can, doing the Lackey Grand Prix. So
get some games in when you can. What I think it's about time for you to win another Lackey Grand Prix.
I mean, I technically have only won one. I've been in the finals.
You're making the top 4.
I'm making I've been pretty successful this season with top 4s and Lackey Grand Prix and even top 2s. But Babuni got me a couple times, and I finally broke through last month, and now got a championship match with Jaden coming up here. Not sure when that'll happen. It'll probably be might not be till early next week. We're both helping out with our church youth camp this weekend, so probably won't be much time for redemption. So depending on when this goes live, that match may or may not have been played yet.
Well, I won't oversell myself, but I did do pretty good with the last editing job. I think it took me like 2 days once I actually started it, I think I started it one day and finished it the next day. So hopefully,
Nice.
That's another thing with stepping away from recording at times and things. Like I'm coming off of several months of not recording. Coming back to it, it's like you have to relearn how to edit from the ground up almost because you're like, I had all these little shortcuts, but now they're out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
You never think to write them down or anything. So hopefully the editing job on the last one was okay, and maybe this one will do decent. But
all right, well, we're recording this on a Wednesday night.
Wednesday night.
If you have it done by Friday night, that would be awesome, because then I'll have something to listen to on the way up to camp.
Okay. I think my wife will have a lot to say with whether that can be done or not. I am off work tomorrow, though, so depending on when we get back. I mentioned last podcast, and I had talked to you about it offline and things about my nephew.
Mm-hmm.
There's questions about potentially if he might be somewhere on the, I don't know the politically correct way to say, somewhere on the spectrum and have some level of autism or tendencies that lean towards that. So, and we have that court date coming up at the beginning of March. So there's a lot of things we're trying to check off so that we can have as much information about like what the care for him is going to look like long-term moving forward before we go to that. And they had told us that the testing for that, we did like a virtual call and gave him some, answered some basic questions about whether or not like he points at things and does he have, does he try to use a lot of words and things, which he doesn't. But they had, I think it was like backlogged like 3 months for the actual in-person testing. And they called us yesterday afternoon and was like, we have a cancellation. Can you be here at 11 on Thursday or tomorrow? Yeah. And yes, we can. So I'm taking off work. So however long that takes, and assuming that this does well enough that we don't need to, figure out something else for this episode, then maybe I can get a jump start on editing tomorrow, which will be cool. Yeah.
Well, no pressure on that. I know I've told you, over direct message, but just want to again give you a huge shout out for the way that you've stepped up for your nephew. That is super cool. Like I'm not a father yet. I hope that someday that's God's plan, but I'm definitely an uncle, and thankfully none of my nieces or nephews are in a situation like that. But if they were, I hope that I could do like you've done, just stepping up, giving this kid some semblance of stability, because it sounds like it's a tough situation. So just a huge shout out to you. And certainly family comes first, before the hobbies.
Absolutely. And I will take your shout out, acknowledge it, and then pass it on to my wife. She's really the rock star I go to work every day and I get somewhat of a break, and she's constantly, and it's difficult when you're going from a 12-year-old working on almost being 13 to where, now you have a 18-month-old toddler that you have to care for that also doesn't communicate verbally yet and things. So it's been a lot of frustrating times here and there throughout, but I think overall it's going well. But definitely the every bit of stability that comes from the entire situation is from my wife. So I will say that. So if she ever listens to the podcast, which I know she won't, but
you just have to make a quick clip of this little segment, and we'll give her the shout out.
Riverside, cue up the clip here.
There you go. Yeah.
But I did also mention on the podcast last week, not last week, but a couple weeks ago, the last episode, if you stuck with, because I think it was like somewhere in, so we talked about not recording and family changes and things, and then we talked about, hey, here's this issue that I had or whatever my experience. And then somewhere in the middle of that, I was like, oh yeah, by the way, there's some information coming out about nationals. So if you stuck through that and found the information about nationals or the tease about that information did go live, not with a lot of fanfare or anything, but how much fanfare is there going to be for saying pre-registration is open this far out? There's, there's a certain level of hype that you need to achieve by doing something other than, hey, you can register. Right. And we are working towards coming up with some cool things. And some of the information we wanted to share was not quite, and it wasn't quite developed enough and thoroughly enough that we could release it at the time of opening pre-registration, but we wanted to do that. But if you go to Land of Redemption, there is now a tab for Nationals 2026. And on that, you can click that. And the first thing you're going to find out is that there's 161 days, I guess, when you hear this, depending on how long that editing takes, it won't be 161 days, but there is a countdown. And despite Jaden's best effort, he was not able to time it with the exact start time of the first category on the first day, but he got close enough. So we can just use what's here. And then there's a pre-register link there and all of the information about nationals. And it is going to be hosted by Mr. Brian Jones of the Oakdale play group there in Kentucky. And is it technically Beattyville or whatever, but it's carved in the side of a mountain, okay? And it would be an awesome place for us to host nationals, but there's no access to an airport. There's no easy travel in and out. There's not a lot of food options nearby. It's literally a boarding school set up, a Christian academy carved in the side of a mountain. And it's cool layout. Facilities are great. The people are even better. It's just not set up well for, connectivity and bringing in a lot of outsiders at one time. So it is actually going to be hosted at a, somewhat nearby church that he has connections with. So it's going to be at Wilmore Free Methodist Church in Wilmore, Kentucky, July 23rd and 25th. I'm not going to go over all of the information, but it is out there for you to go and look up. And I will say that Brian has, if he's done nothing else, he's put together the pieces that should have this be an exciting nationals, as far as getting the hype message out there whenever the time comes for us to start spoiling things and whatnot, because Jaden is part of the hosting team, myself, and then there's him and also Steven, who is another Oakdale employee, which is kind of cool. So he's covered his bases. So once we get some cool information, we should be able to get it out to you in a variety of ways, plus all of the standard ways of Discord and then putting stuff on Land of Redemption and whatnot. So I just wanted to mention nationals before we get into anything deeper, because I didn't want it to be kind of like the last episode where we're in the middle of this and then we just kind of throw it in at the end.
Nationals, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've gotten a few tidbits from Jaden, just because, like you said, he's on the planning team, and I can definitely confirm that there's some cool stuff being planned, some stuff that I don't think has ever been attempted before. So I'm definitely excited.
There's also some stuff that has been attempted and maybe hasn't been seen in a while that, we're trying to potentially bring back.
Yeah, and I think it's fine to, we don't want the peak of the hype to be like right now. Like this is, it's good. You need a build up. You need to get a ramp. We want the hype to be happening like, come early July. Then it's like, all right, now it's truly a countdown. So,
and see, that's where my problem is. Like, this is a slow burn situation, especially if you're involved in the planning stages at this point and whatnot. It's a slow burn, but I'm known for one thing, and that's all gas and no brakes. So I just, whenever the time comes, I'll be leading the charge.
Yeah.
But speaking of things that I don't want to go as an oversight, because I didn't really do a good job of mentioning this, and I already owe some back pay. But the podcast is sponsored by Andy at Your Turn Games and things. And I know that I mentioned he's going to be helping us with distribution for the cool promo cards or whatever that we're making. But in addition to that, Andy's really been killing it with the mystery pack. I haven't personally bought any, but the mystery packs, seeing other people crack them open, and no offense to Rob and the way that Cactus does its packaged product, but when you open a box, there's only one ultra rare. And if you get to it, then it can feel a little flat. It's not as exciting for watching someone else open. It's fun to open it yourself,
right?
Because you're getting to keep all of these cards and things. But once someone opens that ultra rare, it's kind of, it feels like you want it to be more. Well, Andy's like, I will give you more. Double with the quote unquote fat packs or whatever, the ones that have double the amount of cards, putting in random chase foils and things. Andy has been killing it with the mystery packs. So I know you've opened a few of those. So how do you feel as a consumer of that product?
It was really cool. And I don't remember exactly when he announced it, but I think I could be remembering wrong, but I want to say that like maybe a week or so before he announced the idea, I had actually thought to myself, like, how cool would it be if like, he would sell packs where you could get like multiple ultra rares or like an ultra rare and a promo. I don't remember the timing of when exactly I had this thought, but it was something that I was actually going to message him about. And then like a week later, he comes out with these mystery packs. And
Somebody
I was like,
beat you to it.
Yeah, somebody beat me to it. I was like, oh, sweet. It's happening.
So
yeah,
where you stole some of Jaden's notes for nationals planning, he stole some of your notes and then took credit for it. With
Maybe.
Andy.
I don't know. Like and I think it was, and maybe I was watching like another card game or like sometimes like sports cards, they do what they call repacks. And,
yep.
you know,
Very popular.
Yeah. And so that might have been where the idea kind of popped in my head, like watching, you know, someone open a repack on like a sports card, you know, video clip or YouTube something. So maybe that's where kind of like the idea that kind of popped in my head, like, oh, how cool would that be for Redemption? And sure enough, it happened. And yeah, I bought a few from the first batch. I didn't actually get any from the second batch. I kind of waited too long and they all disappeared. But yeah, definitely.
Third batch is loading.
Third batch is on the way. So yeah, I think it's awesome. I definitely agree with you from the you know, with how Cactus does it with their packs, like, you know, and again, this is, you know, there's a whole bunch of variables and factors involved with, like, you know, what can Rob do,
right?
You know.
And the comments are not a slight at all for how they package them. For his target audience, for what he's doing, and to make it as easy on him for packing and things.
Yeah.
And his son that helps. It works very well, knowing that you're guaranteed when you open a box that you're going to get at least one ultra rare, and knowing that every pack is going to now not give you the filler cards and things like the product offering from the official standpoint of Cactus over the past couple of years has gotten so much better. With the Roots cards coming in. And, you know, that was an idea that stemmed from Rob himself initially, but it's just, it takes away a little bit of the hit or not hit. And that's kind of why a while back I had suggested, I don't know, what is it, like a couple years now maybe, I suggested him maybe doing like a 50-50 to where you could get half of one box and half of the other, and you might end up with 2 ultra rares, you might end up with no ultra rares, but you get to play the little chance game with it while splitting up. And, you know, if you want 2 different sets and you don't need bulk of either one in particular, it can be kind of cool for the ultra rare chase.
Buying half of one set, half of another set. Sure.
And maybe you get lucky and that's the row that turns into the ultra rare.
Yeah, I think back when kind of the discussions were happening, I can't remember what set it was, but there was a set that we had put out and you weren't guaranteed an ultra rare. Like the ultra rares were more mixed. So it was like most boxes had 1, some boxes had 2, some boxes had none.
And I hear the outcry already.
And that did
I hear it now.
And that did not go over well. And Rob was like, well, the way we can fix this is we just make each box have 1 ultra rare, and then that keeps it pretty simple. No one feels like they kind of got shorted, which I completely agree with. I think for me, in a perfect world, I would have liked to maybe see, you know, every box is guaranteed 1 ultra rare, and then like 1 in 10 boxes, you get 2 ultra rares or something like that.
Yeah.
That way it kind of, you don't lose that, you know, where if you're opening a box of people and someone pulls the ultra rare and it's like, oh, well, they got the ultra rare, no one else is getting one. Whereas if you have the potential for a second, then it's like, okay, well, that, you know, that last pack could be an ultra rare. You don't know.
Last pack magic.
Last pack magic. That's right. On the flip side, though, I love the foil chase ultra rares. Like, I have yet to pull one myself. I usually don't crack a lot of packs. I usually get like 2 boxes of a new set and then trade for what I need. But yeah, I love the foils. I've been a huge fan of them, like ever since, you know, TXP way back in the day, and just, you know, having foil cards. You know, I love the fancy stuff. I think you and I are kind of the same on that one. Like having a blinged out deck, and I'm currently working on blinging out my deck right now, and trying to get the best version of each card. So
okay, so with you talking about blinging out your deck, and you're saying that you like to showcase it a little bit, Are you planning on playing your serialized text list 3 Woes and Second Coming?
I am. Yep.
You are? Okay.
Yep.
See, I honestly think, and I've been one that, like, for all the Nats promos, I have one that goes in a binder that doesn't get played at all. Mm-hmm. And then if I have an extra copy or however many extra copies I come across, either, by trade or whatever, or begging Brian to let me get one after he wins 18 of them. But once I acquire a second one, then that's a play copy or whatever. But okay. I feel like with it being limited to 25, the value is going to hold whether it's played or not. Yeah. And why not just enjoy it?
Yeah. Well, and I've been, I don't know if you've seen, I've been in the habit of triple sleeving my decks. So we've got
You're not telling me you're triple sleeving 100 card decks.
I absolutely am. That is why we call it the Brown Tower.
Okay.
It is literally a tower.
I did, after playing you at Michigan Nationals, I played you and you had the outer sleeves on your cards.
Yep. So that's what I've got now.
Yeah. So I ended up buying them because I remember picking up one of your cards. Like I looked at your hand or something and I picked up one of your cards and it was like, the card that I looked at was just a basic card. Like it was a standard. I think it was like a common, nothing fancy about it. But the fact that it was in the outer sleeve just made it feel like this card's actually worth something.
Yeah. Well, and inner sleeves too, like the inner sleeve, the regular sleeve, and the outer sleeve.
Yeah.
And the card just feels very much more substantial. And
I am on regular sleeve, outer sleeve. I'm not doing the inner sleeve. I can't make myself do that. Now, with my Nats promos that I keep in the non-played condition, they get the Dragon Shield. I don't know what they call them, but maybe they just call them, I don't know, they fold and slide into the back.
Yeah, those are
they fully encase it.
Yeah, those
right,
are
but I'm saying the type of them, it's not really a true like seal. Like when I bought John's 2016 Son of God, he had inner sleeves, but they were literally like they had adhesive and they fully sealed. I'm a little iffy about doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but the ones where it folds back in, I'm okay with that. So all of my non-2016 Son of God Nets promos in the non-playing binder, those all have the ones that fold back in. I left obviously the one that John had sealed. It's sealed up, so that I'm guessing that he did that pretty soon after he got it, or at least that's what I believe to be the case. So I can almost tell people that that's almost a factory sealed 2016 Son of God, right?
Almost untouched by human hands.
Yeah, almost untouched by human hands. And if John touched it, is that really human hands?
Well, there's
the Red Dragon. But yeah, I think the mystery packs from Your Turn Games is great, and I think the excitement that they've created is pretty cool. I think it would be really cool to, I don't know if the timing's going to work out for it, but I think it would be really cool to get to Nationals and him have like a batch of those that he hasn't released for maybe online sales or whatever, to where he has plenty to sell there and just getting a couple of people and buying them and opening them up kind of at the same time or whatever. That'd be pretty cool.
Mystery pack booster draft?
Hey.
Mystery pack booster draft?
Well, then you'd have to require him to put the same kind of card types in, balance it out. But that would be pretty cool to play like sealed with mystery pack.
Ooh.
You take the sealed deck, you've got your cohesive deck here, and you can just spice it up with whatever you get.
We got some ideas to.
Yeah, we got some ideas, some extra work we can create for Andy. But I think if anytime he puts them online, I think most of them are going to probably blow through now, depending on, as long as he keeps packing them well. Now, if he gets watered down and he's like, hey, we're going to pack, a meek Daniel Lost Soul as the primary chase card. I don't know that anybody but E-Man is buying those, but he will sell them.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings us to kind of the meat and potatoes of this episode. And that being continuing kind of the conversation that we had on episode 94, where Jake and I talked about my Nationals experience and things, and we kind of illuminated what we feel are some issues. Me more than he did. He was kind of just tagging along and, sharing kind of his thoughts about competitive play. And I was more wrestling with kind of where do I go from here with the game of redemption. So I mentioned in that conversation, I didn't want to just have it open-ended and be like, look, here's a problem or whatever. look, there's a car wreck when you can go over and help the people out or come up with kind of solutions or being part of what's the next step of that. And you're one person that I guess, I don't know how much I really talked to you about the issues as they progressed, but you did make yourself available a couple of times. And I definitely want to thank the people that I was able to talk with or whatever, and people like yourself that made yourself available to bounce things off of, or, I don't even know, because I feel like I'm in the middle of still processing those feelings. I haven't processed it. Isn't something that's completely out of mind now, but I do feel better being on this side of it, having shared it. And then you obviously get to bring a little bit of kind of a unique perspective, being that you've been on the elder team before. You've also been just a player. You've also been around the game for a very long time and seen different iterations of kind of the state of the game and whatnot. So I think all of those are positives for potentially continuing this and trying to progress towards some solutions or whatnot. So I guess I'll just give you the floor and let you kind of touch base on kind of, I guess, feedback for like my thoughts on that episode. If you wanted to add anything before we start talking about analyzing it at a more constructive level for trying to find the solutions.
Yeah, I think one thing that I wanted to kind of highlight, and you mentioned this in the last episode, is just, we got to remember that at the end of the day, the judges are human and they will make mistakes from time to time. You look at sports, highly top of their game referees and umpires, and the biggest games of the season, in football or basketball, whatever sport, and sometimes they blow a call. They just, they get it wrong. And, obviously there's been some attempts with, instant replay and stuff like that. But, even sometimes for whatever reason, something can't be undone. And it was the wrong call. So I think, we've got a fantastic team of judges and people who, work on the rules to try and make sure that they're as clear and there's as little gray area as possible. But even then, sometimes there's things that, a situation that simply hasn't, or an interaction that simply hasn't come up. And it's like, oh, did the rules mean this or do they mean this? And I think that's gotten farther and farther apart where those situations happen. I think back to a situation back, I was at my very first Nationals in 2004. So we're going a long ways back.
Long way back.
Long way back. And there was a deck, a Type 2 combo deck that I was playing. And I was in the middle, it was round one, and I had just pulled off the combo, or so I thought. And Brian Hake walks over, and he just kind of stands there, and he's kind of watching me go through the iterations of this combo, where I'm basically going to, lock my opponent out of the game in Type 2. And after a couple minutes of observing, he says, I'm gonna something to the effect of, I'm gonna pause you guys for a second. I need to see if, this, the way that you're doing this is legal. And I was like, oh, okay. I felt that I had,
you had worked on it, practiced it, and you're in the middle of it. And he's like, hold on, let me double check.
Yeah. And as it turns out, he ended up, he talked with some of the other judges, and it essentially came down to a definition. It was the definition of a defeated character. I was using, which at the time, there was a definition, but it did not really encompass this particular situation. I was basically blocking with an evil character, and then self-capturing that evil character to trigger that character being defeated. So then I had one of the cards that if your character's defeated, you get to take all your enhancements back to your hand. And then I would have another character still in the battle.
Right.
So doing that, I was able to basically just kind of indefinitely block someone and then be able to use, all the enhancements to tear apart their deck, and, they'd be left with essentially nothing. But they ended up saying, like, nope, that is not the definition or that is not the definition of defeated character or something like that. And it was kind of it was like a rule being kind of codified in the middle of a game type thing. and I know I wasn't like, I was, it was my first nationals. I was, fairly well-known player, but probably not, like I wasn't at that time considered maybe one of the top players. And so I didn't put up a huge argument. Like, I guess kind of took it as, well, okay, I guess I misunderstood that this entire time, but it seemed like to me that what I was doing fit the criteria. So it was a little disappointing for that to happen. And thing is, I'm not the first person that happened to. Hopefully it won't keep happening. I mean, it's, again, whenever someone comes up with some crazy combo, obviously adjustments need to be made. But thankfully these days it seems like those adjustments are not made mid-tournament, mid-game.
It would seem
that could definitely be a feel bad. And even thinking back to your situation, like, yeah, that it seems like that was, along those same lines, but yeah, going back to what I was first saying, like, we got to give the judges some grace, and we've got to realize that they're not going to get every single ruling correct for whatever reason. Sometimes something just doesn't get ruled the way that it should, so to speak.
Right.
And maybe that's from and we'll get more into why that happens, but yeah, so that's kind of where I wanted to start at.
At the same time, though, it is a not to be the lightning bolt of the other side of the coin. While every call is not going to be right in things, there needs to be active effort. And as players, we need to be able to believe that the people in charge, leadership, people that have accepted the role of elder, being on that group of individuals that are charged with managing the state of the game, we have to be able to believe that they are actively working to eliminate those issues as they happen. I think, which is kind of where I felt like there was a little bit of disconnect after my experience. Obviously, you stayed in the Airbnb. You heard all about it that night. Just for me to go back the next day and have it happen again in teams, to know, I said on the last podcast, literally it amounted to nothing but wasted time.
Yep.
But we still picked up a dominant in things. And I think from that, what would have probably eased a lot of my frustration over the past, 6 months. Man, it feels bad to say it, but it really has been kind of that long. But somewhere in there, and I admitted that I made mistakes and whatnot during that time, and I probably sat on negative feelings for far too long without trying to reconcile them and things. So I am not innocent in any way of this, but I do think that while we want to extend, grace and acknowledge that leaders are, volunteers and all of that, I think there's still, for accepting that role and things, there is definitely a level of responsibility that is attached to that I'm not expecting miracles or anything to happen fast. I even mentioned that in the last episode is I don't think that the solution to these issues will be fast or swift or overnight or anything like that. But I think the visibility of seeing it actively be worked on, I think, is important to at least get updates to know that things are being worked on. And I think there's a big amount of potential for a situation that happens at nationals. Step away, a couple of weeks or whatever, a month down the road, and then follow up with players involved in those individual things or use those to determine potential rule changes and things. And so I think that's one of the bigger steps is understanding that everyone involved, no one, I guess, apart from potentially passing some promo cards or whatever here and there and maybe getting discount on some sealed product, people aren't getting paid to do this. And so I think that's an important thing. But at the same time, we as players that are investing time, effort, energy, money, resources into it need to be able to see. So I think there needs to be a level of visibility with seeing those things be worked on. That will be part of any potential solutions moving forward.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's, you want to see, like we know, like from a design standpoint, that there's a lot of work being done. We've seen the work being done with like the fundraiser cards. We see that part. Yeah, there hasn't been as much. I mean, thankfully, there hasn't been as much needed to be adjusted with the rules in, I would say, the last, maybe 2 seasons. And I think when the last major thing was, maybe it was the 4 activations rule.
Did the 4 activations rule happen before or after 1TC? I can't remember the order of those 2 things, but I think those are the 2 last significant changes to kind of the overall rule structure of the game.
Yeah. Yep. And those, I think, have both been really good for the game. I think everyone's kind of in agreement on that. Maybe I'll kind of segue that into, some of my experiences as an elder, being part of the rule team where, at least when I was a part of it, and, I'm not, obviously serving in that capacity right now, so I don't know what the group dynamic is now. But when it was kind of the main core of our team was myself, Gabe, John, and Marcus. And then, we kind of had our little core group of 4 of us, and then, the larger elder team. And there was a lot of things that we went back and forth on, and we had very different, at times very different kind of viewpoints on how things should change, or if they should change, how fast they should change. And, and we did a lot of back and forth, and I think for the most part, it was good. There were some nights that I definitely remember being frustrated, thinking like, how could they possibly think that this is, the right way to go? But we had a mix of people who were, some of us that wanted to, push changes really quickly. Others of us who were much more reserved and like, let's keep as close to the status quo as we can, because otherwise players are just going to get, overwhelmed by the game, changing so drastically. And I think for, in general, the game has evolved in a fairly positive way. Like it, I remember back to when one of the more controversial rule changes.
Angel War? Oh, rule change. Oh, my bad.
No, this was after Angel Wars. But one of the most biggest controversy rule change things that I can remember was when the rule changed that Son of God could no longer rescue the New Testament only lost soul, or the Star 4 lost soul from Kings back in Scrolls days. So this was before Son of Gods had the negate and rescue a lost soul language. And so there was a huge discussion, probably even, you could even say like argument, of people who, said, on the one side, you had the people who said, by the strict reading of the rules, this card says it can only be rescued by a New Testament hero. And then you had the people, which, I was probably more on this side of the status quo where, Son of God overrides everything. Like nothing stops, kind of like almost like a theological.
The unstoppable God.
That's, yeah. And, and I remember that debate, discussion, just, people, and this was something that was even, I don't remember if it was announced and then discussed, or if maybe the elder team at that time even like kind of had it being discussed in the community. I don't remember exactly that part, but whether it was announced and then shared, or if there was public discussion before it was officially changed, I don't recall exactly, but yeah, in the end, I think it was the right ruling for the consistency of the game, and I think we've come a long way in getting consistent rules.
You're saying that making it to where by the strict wording of the card, it couldn't rescue those souls was the right call in the
Yes.
moment, which then I
Yeah.
guess led to better development of that card moving forward as other versions got printed because it negated and rescued as a combo ability.
Yeah, and that was, kind of that negate ability certainly came out of that, debate and discussion where it's, people just, said like, they just, like, it was almost like a thing where people didn't feel right about, Son of God not being able to rescue a lost soul, just from, again, that theological standpoint, which, obviously there's theology in the game. It doesn't always, it doesn't necessarily fit, like, and it's a card game.
I think I would slant towards agreeing with you that making the ruling that it can't rescue that because it specifically says rescue and doesn't have anything that stops any other ability. And so nothing's stopping that soul ability that says it can only be rescued by something that is not Son of God. And I can understand that is potentially, I don't want to say that it is for sure, but I would assume that's an oversight in card development or, creating those cards. I don't think that was ever an intention of the design of those soul cards to where it couldn't be rescued by Son of God.
Well, and what it kind of came back from was the, like when the female only soul was first printed, it said by a female hero or the Son of God. So the first thing that kind of came up was, even before the New Testament soul was, could New Jerusalem, the old New Jerusalem rescue the female only lost soul? And I feel like I remember people were accepting of that. Again, this was a long time ago. So people understood, but then they kind of, when we got to like the New Testament only lost soul and the Star 4 lost soul, people were kind of wanted to say, well, the female only lost soul kind of, that text on there is kind of implied on these other two. So it's kind of like, they have the implied,
right,
can only be rescued by a New Testament hero or the Son of God, or, a hero toughness 4 or less, or the Son of God. And so, yeah, so like for me, that was, I started on the side of, Son of God should be able to rescue anything. And then I gradually moved over to, okay, this does make sense with how we want the rules to be consistent.
Yeah. And I think so in religious things, a lot of times and politics that get involved with those, there's this phrase of, a famous phrase in American politics and things of separation of church and state. Right. So if we apply that to situations like this, I think there's actually a good bit of understanding that I guess I could share kind of the way I see things by saying, and we always talk about the intent of the game and all of that, and what the game that goes to the fun and fellowship kind of can be a slippery slope because I don't think you can let certain aspects of the game trump the logical aspects of the fact that it is a card game and has to have structure and things. Mm-hmm. So even though we acknowledge and we, with our personal beliefs, I'm talking about my beliefs and what I know to be your beliefs and things, but we can't assume that someone's going to come to the game and understand that the Son of God should be able to trump anything.
Yep.
And so by the letter of the law, what is written on that card and what was written on those souls, you have to rule that Son of God cannot rescue those cards. And I think that I'm glad that ended up being the ruling. And I feel like there's a few aspects of things that have come up in my time in the game, which is since 2019, shortly after Nats. So I guess this year I'm coming up on 7 years being somewhat involved with the game or knowing about it, investing into it as a player. I feel like there's a lot of times where we allow the fact that we have these shared beliefs and we know that our beliefs a lot of times line up with the creator of the game and things. But I think the logical aspect of someone as an outsider has to be able to understand things and they have to be codified in a way to where you have no like gray area or an arbitrary, like Son of God should just trump that. It's kind of implied that you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make sure that by what's written on the cards and things that there is structure, and you almost, it sounds bad, but you almost have to separate the theology to make sure that the card itself makes sense. The way that I guess you bring theology in is when you design the cards, you make sure that you're accounting for how you want that to be played and carried out within the structure of the game. But when something slips through, you can't be a revisionist to where you're just like, oh, well, that was supposed to do that and you do it that way. Yep. When common sense, when looking at it, would be a different outcome.
Yeah, and I think the game has come a huge way from where it was. And I think that's it's a credit to the Elder team. I think we started shifting that way, I want to say, shortly before I officially joined the Elder team. And definitely while I was on it, there was, myself and Gabe and John and then Marcus really, making that push where it's like, yeah, we got to get away from the intent of the card, and that's how it's ruled, to note the card does what it says. And there's a common saying in the Magic card game where the reading the card explains the card, and that's what we want to get to.
I think we've done a great job lately with that, but yeah, that's a phrase that when I first came into the game and the ability was on the art, that was not necessarily the case. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we've come a long way. Yeah, for sure. In Scrolls days, reading the card did not always explain the card, because that was, there were nuances that you had to know, and nuances that sometimes differed based on where you were playing and in what part of the country. So
you're starting to get into some sticky area. But hey, so does Magic have a phrase? You said they have a phrase. Reading the card should explain the card, or explains the card, right? Is that the gist of it? Okay.
Reading the card explains the card. So usually people say that when someone, it's kind of a
dumb question.
Yeah, it's kind of a tongue in cheek,
right?
Like, oh, if you just would read the card, then the card, it would explain it to you. But,
well, do they have a phrase of, and this is a phrase I've heard before, maybe around redemption tables, but I'm just going to ask, considering the current landscape of things, and maybe I'm not reading the room for the gist of this, but do they have a saying that a card laid is a card played?
Ooh,
where did that phrase come from initially? Because I have heard it in the redemption world, but after Nationals, I don't think it's true.
So I'm guessing that predates even collectible card games, and probably goes back to playing card games of.
I know you don't do that when you're playing spades with the boys. That's all I know.
Yeah, well, that actually so that actually is a good segue into another thing that I wanted to kind of bring up. This is more of just a fun fact, but we had mentioned the whole picking up of a dominant thing. So for those of us who have been around long enough, we might remember when picking up a dominant was actually, there was a clause for it in the rules, and that was back in the day before we had, the dominant priority.
That was in the what was the terminology someone used when I first got in the game? I believe they referenced
dominant slapjack
dominance.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was just whoever could get theirs down first. But you're saying whoever got it down first, but then you could potentially pick it up before using it?
No, so it would be, so there was a clause in the rules where, and this was especially relevant for multiplayer, which we obviously, we don't have multiplayer other than booster now, but
if Justin can't get to 1, he can't get to 7. Yes.
That was never in the rules.
It was a gray area, trust me.
It's never codified, only in people's minds. But so there was a rule clause that said if 2 players attempted to play a dominant, at essentially the same time, whichever one hit the table first, that was the one that went through. But the second player was allowed to pick their dominant up if they had attempted,
because
to
the
play
landscape of the game might have changed with the other players down.
Yeah.
I got you.
So if there was only one soul on the table and you and I both try to slap down, Son of God, it was whoever's hit the table first. But if yours hit the table a second after mine, you were allowed to pick yours up. You didn't have to fizzle your Son of God. Because obviously that would be even a worse outcome for you.
I'm so glad I came after this iteration of the game.
Yeah, well, because there was also, back in the day, you used to be able to, and this was before even like the whole dominant thing was kind of established, where if, let's say I'm going for a rescue with a hero, and I'm holding Angel of the Lord, I'm ready to play. It doesn't matter, like as soon as you block with an evil character, do your special ability, I'm ready to throw that bad boy down and discard your evil character. Well, as a blocker, you were allowed to essentially drop an evil character with an enhancement, like simultaneously onto the table before I would get to play my Angel of the Lord. So you could essentially kind of like stack the two cards together, and then because they didn't hit the table at the exact same moment, because technically the one on bottom would hit first, you were allowed to do that to kind of get around me trying to slap down Angels of the Lord before that. So that was the truly Wild West days of Redemption.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I don't know how I would have coexisted with those rulings. I mean, I guess at least it would be understood if it was in the rule book, but that leaves so much to be interpreted by what happened first, to where it can get in that gray area to where, no, mine hit first, and then it's a he said, she said, call a judge. Yeah. They can't really rule one way or the other.
And that was what finally fixed it, was people actually did read the rule book and said, no, wait a minute, there needs to be a checking of initiative. Like, obviously, if someone's doing that, I'm rescuing with a 10-10, you're blocking with a 1-1, everyone knows whose initiative it's going to be. But there was, in the rules, it says once the player blocks, you check for initiative. And that initiative check became the opportunity for someone to then play a dominant before an enhancement could be played. So the rules were actually like correct, and what they should have been. It was just people were kind of ignoring that. And, and then it was kind of like almost a moment of enlightenment for everyone, like, oh, that's how we should have been doing this all along. Because, yeah, it definitely does not feel great to be playing a game of dexterity when it comes to card games.
Where strategy is supposed to be, not necessarily the open interpretation of rules. I think it's gotten better, because I think a lot of times nowadays when someone has a question, they generally know at least some level of the ruling or whatever, or when they ask a question, it's not like blind, like, how would this interaction happen? It's more of like, when I do this, would that happen as a result? And then it's a yes or no thing. So I think even just reading into how people are asking a lot of questions, I think a lot of the murkiness has been cleared up overall, but that doesn't mean that we can't still strive for better outcomes in things of that nature. So let me ask you specifically about something that I brought up probably way too many times on that conversation with Jake on the last episode. And we talked about it offline, and it's like, there's so many times like you can pinpoint to a situation like this, but I want to know, and I feel like me and you in a teams game where you were playing with John Michelesian in Knoxville, I believe we were playing the teams game, and we had a little spat to where I don't know, it was like a ticky-tack thing, and you made one to me, and then I made one to you, and it was kind of a irritating thing, but we moved on. But what is your experience with oh, you're going to be that way, or you play that way? Oh, it's like that mentality of once you have held someone so they play that dominant nowadays, and or whatever, and for some reason it doesn't work or it fizzles. Generally, I think 100% that card has to fizzle, and we don't do take backs. I don't like playing with take backs. And if someone calls me on one, generally I won't even try to take back. But if I were to, just as a habit, or whatever, what comes natural, oh, I can't do that, pick it up, and they had an issue with that, 100%, okay, it goes discard pile, no problem. But the tension that's immediately caused by the, oh, it's like that comment, or my favorite thing was my first nationals. I was Patrick Chavaria. I believe that's how you say his last name. And he was like, I hate to be that way, but this is nationals.
Yep.
and so then he made a play, like a thing. And I was like, and there was a little bit of issue with that because it wasn't I had spoken about a what I thought I was going to do, and I hadn't moved a card. And then he reached over and helped my card make that move. But anyway, not to knock him or anything. It was a good learning experience. But you're going to be that guy. What experience do you have with those type of situations?
Yeah, so I think where I fall on that is you do have to take into account like what the context of the game is. Playing a casual game at a Friday night game night with a new player is not the same as playing at nationals in round 8 of Swiss.
Agreed.
So I think there has to be a little bit of understanding of context where, it can't be completely black and white, but it can't be completely gray either, if that makes sense. Like there needs to be an understanding of, yeah, I'm not going to make a new player, young kid, do something that basically loses the game for him, or, and make him stick with that decision because, I want to point it out to him and I want that person to learn. And, I might say something to the effect of, hey, you make sure you don't want to do this, because in a tournament setting, you might not be able to take that play back. Again, this is thinking of in a friendly, casual game. In a tournament setting,
This is where I'm really interested to know your answer. Like, where does it start? Does it start, okay, you're in a tournament, now it's official. Does it start there immediately, or is it like a tiered thing to you? Because I think this is where a lot of personal interpretation of how to apply things happens. And then you end up with kind of the situation that ends up at national, someone thinking that it's okay to take back where another person thinks it's black and white in a tournament setting.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I probably have to say that it is a little bit, in my mind, a tier thing where, and this is me going for my opponent. Like I'm not expecting really to ever be able to take something back, in a tournament game. Whereas if I'm willing to give a little bit of grace to an opponent, especially if it's a new player, or it's, maybe it's someone who is struggling a little bit to keep track of everything that's going on. And sometimes, honestly, I'll even, again, I'm not going to probably do this playing against you at nationals, but I might point out something like, hey, just a reminder, if you draw a card, I have a Priest of Zeus in play. Basically trying to help someone learn what to look for and how to analyze a board state so that they don't make a misplay. Because, I think that's part of even in a local tournament, I want to be teaching, my playgroup members, the newer players, the less experienced players. When it gets to, nationals or even a regional or a state, I don't mind someone asking for a take back. I'm not going to get, annoyed by it necessarily. And as long as there's an understanding that if I say, no, that's got to stick, then they don't get annoyed. And I think that's where, what you said with, that's the way it's going to be comment, that's 100% wrong. I think if we can work on, not getting all worked up because they asked, there needs to be an expectation of, you should not get frustrated or annoyed or making snarky comments because I said no.
Do you think that should be? Do you think that's something that potentially should be codified somewhere in, like, not necessarily the rule book, but like the etiquette of that, to where a player has the right to ask their opponent or whatever, but then the opponent has the right to grant it or not, and then where do you? Because it's almost like wanting to have your cake and eat it too. Like for the player that's asking, they can have the right to ask, but then that doesn't need to be tied to an assumption of it's going to be allowed to happen. And then when it doesn't or isn't allowed to happen, then that's where you get the snarky comment or whatever. And I feel like it's personally easier for it to be policed in a way that it's either they're allowed or they're not allowed. And if you leave it up to each individual in a tournament setting now, where you're talking about like your play group or even a local or, a small district, a lot of these are happening at people's houses or at local churches or whatever with 5 to 10 players at a lot of times. Like that's not the biggest concern or whatever. I think that can almost be left up to the individuals or whatever, but it feels like state and up tournaments, like where people are traveling, because I've never traveled that much for a district tournament. Like, I guess the only one I really traveled for was Mr. Classic. Like, that was long distance or whatever. That's, 7 hours or whatever. Traveling up to Knoxville for that first Mr. Classic, that was essentially a district tournament. But when it comes to a state, like, we went to New York State last year. I'm from Alabama. That's a long travel time. And then if you get there, like, I understand what you're saying about I shouldn't be offended to hear someone say, "Can I take that bag?" But it does strike a nerve. I've traveled this whole way. I've put a deck together. I've worked hard to learn the deck inside and out so that I don't misplay with it. I'm sitting here holding myself to a standard, and someone that I know is an established player on the other side says, "Hey, can I take this back?" That's not saying that happened. It didn't happen. I'm just using an example. Yeah. So nobody in the New York play group needs to wonder if I'm talking about you. I'm not. They were great up there. Mark's done a great job, building that group up, and most of the players are well versed enough to know how to carry throughout a game without any issues. And the other ones, are newer to the game or don't play as much, and you can easily tell and differentiate. So he's done a really good, solid job with that group. But do you understand where I'm coming? Like, I don't want to come off like that guy that people might reference, but I feel like it's hard to know where that line is. And especially if it's not codified that this is where the line is, it almost sets up the potential for those negative encounters or negative exchanges that lead to negative player experience. We always talk about NPE when it comes to combos and things, but sometimes it's the etiquette and how players interact with each other that's the negative play experience. And someone's probably thought that, like I mentioned on that last recording, somebody's probably sat down, played me, and been like, "Oh, because he's trying to hold some kind of line or whatever, like you just have to be that way or whatever," and walked away with a negative thing. But I would never enforce something on another player that I wouldn't hold myself to.
Right.
And I've never fussed about not getting to, like, when somebody says, "Oh, that doesn't work because of that, so that's in discard pile." I've never argued that.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned our team's game. If I remember right, the situation.
I have no clue what the situation was. I just know that I had a chance to make a dig at you, and I was like, "Yes, I'm gonna take it."
I want to say it was something. I could be remembering wrong. I'm not trying to make myself look better here, but it was something where I think because of something that we had active on our side, you weren't able to do, and so I called you on it, and then I did the same thing on my turn, and then you tried to call me on it, but I was like, "No, it works because of this, or this," and I was just kind of annoyed that
mine was 90% in jest, but me and you had only interacted enough to where that was probably awkward at best and did not land right. But mine was literally just to put it back at you, hey, because team games are supposed to be fun. Like, if you're not laughing or whatever, they should be fun. And a lot of times, we do let the competitive side of that and the wonkiness of the rules and stuff get frustrating at times or whatnot. But I remember this at this point, I was not trying to be that snarky guy. I was just doing it mostly as a fun jab back. But I'm pretty sure that you probably walked away. What a punk.
Let me say this. I was already not in the best mind space going into that game. I really didn't want to play teams that year. And yeah, so I was already kind of in
you got roped into it because E-Man wasn't available. I think it was.
Something along those lines.
If I had to guess, because it's usually
Yeah.
John and E-Man that play together.
Yep. And E-Man decided he wanted to do sealed, and that I was somehow then supposed to play teams with John. Don't get me wrong, I love both those guys. But that was not really what I was looking to do. And so I was not in the best mind space going into that game. And so, yeah, like when I snapped back, like that was totally on me. And it was just like, I mostly just wanted to be done with it. And it was,
I picked that up afterwards.
Like who's this guy trying to tell me how the game works when I've been playing this game for 20 years type? That's what's going through my mind. Certainly not.
And it doesn't help that me and Jeremy had beaten you the year before with you and Jaden.
Was that the year before, or was that
That was the year before, because that was in Iowa, and then that Knoxville was the next year.
Yeah, there was a couple. Let's just say that I have not had the greatest experience with teams at nationals. I have won one, Jaden, and I did win one.
With the Hidden Throne.
The Hidden Throne.
Yep, I remember reading that article.
Yep.
I want to say shortly after I got involved with the game. It was one of the articles I found on Land of Redemption.
Yep, and that was fun. But in other years, it's been like Jaden and I we've gotten second quite a few times by just kind of some unfortunate circumstances. Like there was one year that we beat the team that ended up first, but then we timed out against another team and like lost against the team in third. Like it just, kind of just some of those. And then there was a year where, actually the Iowa year where
I was wondering if you were going to get back to it.
That whole thing.
When Jaden had it in the bag and my top deck was, and a dominant from each opponent, or
yes.
However it's worded. So I got to top deck his, I believe it was Angel of the Lord. And then the next star that I was activating was delivered. Discard the top card of each opponent's deck.
Something along the lines where we just really, like in the worst possible moment, the worst possible thing happened.
Yeah.
That's happened multiple times in some of our team's matches, but so just going back to that, like I just if you ever felt that was like because of you,
no, not at all. I think I walked away from that, or I think I felt that your frustration throughout that whole game and throughout the rounds of teams that it looked like you were frustrated at was because as we sat down to play, I saw Meek Daniel Souls come out, and I was like, oh, that's why he's upset or whatever.
Yeah,
because I guess you were just playing whatever deck that they had built for teams.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so not a Justin deck.
Nope. No, absolutely not.
So I kind of thought that being able to put in like a strategic approach to it was where your frustration was, but I was still trying to have a good time, potentially at your expense, but now we're here to laugh about it. Several years later, we're good.
We are, yeah. No, I will probably never forget that experience, just because, it was just a weird one, and yeah, here we are.
So I guess we each took turns being that guy in that game.
A little bit for sure. I guess one of the other things that when I kind of shot some notes over to you, is I wanted to maybe talk about, so kind of getting into when something like that happens, when, the situation that you had last year. And I kind of, I had some thoughts about how should these situations be resolved? And I think, first, I think I want to make a distinction between that there's things that are misplays and there's things that are game rule violations. And so just to kind of define some terms here, a misplay is something where I take an action and it's not maybe what I wanted to do, but it's still a legal action.
That's what you're defining as a misplay.
A misplay, yep. So okay. I play Second Coming. I pick up my discard pile because I forgot that Son of God is still in my deck. I wanted to play Second Coming to get Son of God, forgot or just too quickly picked up the wrong pile. That's a misplay. That's something that I obviously an incorrect, line of play, but still a legal play. And so, you have those, whereas a game rule violation is where someone makes just does something that's against the rules. There was a situation last year at Nationals in one of my games where during a battle, I had played Glory of the Lord to restrict enhancements from being played for the whole turn. And I was the blocking player. And then my opponent in their discard phase played a territory class enhancement, which allowed them to look at my hand. It was Angelic Guidance. So then my opponent got to look at my hand and was then searching through deck for a card. And then while he was doing that, I realized, wait a minute, Glory says for the entire turn. So he was literally restricted from playing enhancements for the rest of the turn. But now he's already played it. He's already looked at my hand. And it's kind of like, okay, so this was clearly a game rule violation.
So I'm curious how this would be ruled, because my inclination is that even though he's carried out part of the ability, he was not allowed to play it, so it should go back to his hand.
So that's how we played it.
Okay.
He didn't get the card that he was going to search for.
But he does get 2 free uses for hand knowledge.
Correct. And I feel like in the moment, I guess I just kind of let that slide. Looking back, and I even, we talked about it later on, and we actually both kind of came to the conclusion that, the enhancement should have just been discarded. Like, it should have been just treated as though, because he did get the hand knowledge, obviously he didn't get the card he searched for, but the game state, the known information changed. He got to see my hand. He got to know, for the most part, what I would be working with on my upcoming turn. And so for me, when I think of misplays versus a game rule violation, I would like to see something codified in the sense that, like, a game rule violation, or the result, or whatever is done to resolve it, should almost never benefit the player who made the game rule violation.
I can get behind that.
There are going to be some rare cases, and this is kind of another topic that obviously comes up a lot in these situations, whereas the quote unquote repairable game state, like what is repairable, what is not repairable, where a game rule violation simply can't be undone to the point where it doesn't benefit the player who made the violation. I actually had a situation like this also at last year's Nationals, where a dominant restricting effect was, I think it was the cross. Pretty sure it was the cross, was active, but was being negated. My opponent had the cross active. I had a negate neutrals hero active. So and it had been that way, like that had been the game state for like several rounds. And then we get into this battle, and we're both playing dominance. I'm pretty sure I played the first one, and he played some. I played another one. I think we literally probably played 5 or 6 dominance between us in this one battle. And then
Sounds pretty epic.
And then at the end, literally at the end of the battle, I think we had gotten past the battle phase. It was either in like we're both looking to see if anything else can be done, like battle resolution essentially, or even after battle. where we realized that he had a fight by the numbers hero in battle that would have negated my territory class hero basically that entire time. And so the cross would have been active for that entire battle. And
is this when you got a judge involved, or did you guys work it back?
I believe we had, kept the result of the battle, because I think we had a judge come over and kind of explained what happened. And then we all kind of just said, like, there's way too much there was searching and, characters being added and characters being discarded. Again, it was both players that did it. Like
Right.
and I do admit that I was the first one that I think started basically the chain of dominance. It was like, I played an add to battle dominant. He played an angel. I played a crouch choice. Like all these different things happening because both of us were thinking like, oh, the cross is being negated, because it's been negated the whole time. And I think we had to come to an agreement that, yeah, it wasn't a repairable game state, like going all the way back. Like, he knows what I have. I know what he has. And, I ended up getting the block. And even though, I was the one who, I'm pretty sure, made the first, violation, I don't think it can necessarily, it can't be a 100% thing because, again, sometimes you can't go back that far.
Yeah.
But whenever possible, the resolution should either be neutral or should benefit the player who did not make the gameplay violation.
So you had that, and I kind of piggybacked off of that, and it might sound harsh the way I worded it, but it was like intent versus ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think that when analyzing the issues we're talking about and kind of these quirky rulings and things and trying to move forward with some kind of solution that kind of limits them as much as possible, I think we have to make sure any solution isn't able to be taken advantage of. There's one thing that got explained in the time leading up to nationals and even at nationals, because it was brought up almost like a comparable, and I don't think that the point ever got across the way that we were intending it. But this is something that started with Brian asking the question about somebody throws down Son of God and Second Coming, but the Second Coming hits the table first, right? And then, well, the assumption is we know how they're trying to play that, and they're just putting them down. We know, so we understand, and at the same time, if you're at that point, you're now judging based on intent, what someone intends to do versus what they actually did. I understand it. I don't like it because I think it creates the opportunity for someone to turn an intentional thing, either to do something that looks like a misplay and make it be intentional, or kind of vice versa. Them intentionally do something, but then use the grace that we offer for takebacks to undo it when it doesn't work the way that they want it to, or whatever. And I'll take it to kind of that situation, and that happened in our teams game I mentioned on the last episode, where Keegan's clearly got the dominant that's going to negate Thomas the Twin, so Harvest Time is going to go back. There's nothing else really for anyone to do but analyzing that immediate, like something didn't go according to plan, so you analyze the board, usually a lot more intently than you did before making a game action, because now you're having to pivot and try to figure out where do you go from here. Oh, now I have this Proud Pharisee that it didn't trigger. Not that it was impactful in the game or anything. It wasn't. But at that time, someone has now gained knowledge that Keegan has woes in their hand. Now, what if they have some kind of, you know what I mean? Like, that's gaining that information and then replaying it in a different way because we're allowing the take back. And I know that wasn't used in this case, but where do you, like, you have to be able to clearly tell intention versus ignorance. And if you cannot tell, which I don't think you can tell because it can be manipulated one way or the other, I think you have to, whatever solution or ruling approach you have to the game has to account for someone may intentionally do this. So in your situation, to where it wasn't caught by the player that the cross was active, whoever, let's just say that you didn't have a bunch of dominants back and forth and it only benefited the one player that played the dominant. Now that could have been a conscious choice. I don't know who you played, and I'm not saying that, but we have to acknowledge, and this is like the separation of church and state I mentioned before, like we can't assume everybody has these outstanding morals and would not slant the game in their favor. Yep. So where do you have, like you get what I'm saying? Like now it's muddy because if we found out afterwards that the cross should have been active and they got to play a dominant, now I have to wonder if they knew the cross was active and still chose to play that or whatever. It becomes murky, and I think you can't rule, and you can't make assumptions on intent, even if it's something as simple as Son of God and Second Coming. I don't like that at the end of the game, because if they throw it down there and they waste a free rescue and they have to go into battle to get that fifth one now, versus they're getting it because they're already at 3, the other player may string it out and get a chance to win. Yep. So where do you like, I get it, but I also don't get it.
Yeah. And that's where when I talked in the situation with the territory class, that was kind of the reasoning that we both kind of came to, was like, yeah, because he got that hand knowledge from playing that enhancement, there's no way to judge like, oh, like, well, what if because then he could just do that every time. Like, oh, I look at your hand. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to look at your hand. I guess I get this, and it's just like, where you're exactly right. Like, where do you judge that intent, where I do something and it's like, oh, oops, I guess I didn't mean to do that. And
silly me. I'm a silly goose. Let me pick this up and I'll do it again next turn so I can see your hand again after you draw 3.
Yeah. So, there's definitely, it does, there is more gray than I think we'd all like there to be. I think we all want to see, I mean, everyone wants it to be black and white except for themselves, right? Like, that's just kind of, like, it's a little bit how we're wired. Like, we want to be able to,
I don't know if I'm jiving with that, because I do want it to be black and white for my own. Like, if I'm wrong, I want to be 100% wrong and know that I was wrong so that I can correct and pivot. Yeah. But if I'm only wrong in the eyes of one judge and not another judge, it makes it, and I'm not trying to dwell on the negative impact of my rulings that I got at Nationals last year, because I wholeheartedly think that I got ruled incorrectly to the situation both times. But at the same time, I should have, in the moment, respected Marcus enough in his position to make that ruling without. I do think we need some kind of etiquette to how do we potentially challenge or push back on to get a conversation with multiple people so that we can come to the better understanding. But I know that has to be done respectfully. I did not handle that situation well, but at the same time, I can't be upset about the way it got ruled. Go and talk to someone else that is in a capacity to make judgings and rulings and things, and them tell me that they would have ruled it differently, because now the gray area is amongst how it is being ruled, not just how it's written or laid out in the rule book. So not to harp on that, but like I personally want to see it be black and white, even when it applies to me. If I was wrong in that I see those things wrong, and everyone I talked to was like, no, you're wrong, then and I could go and somebody could point me out in the rule book where I am wrong. I don't like it, but I will accept it 100% without pushback.
Yeah, and I guess I was talking more about like our natural tendencies. I think more so that and this is kind of a life thing, even more so than a card game, where it's just we don't always want people. We want to be able to hold other people accountable, and then we get a little bit like, oh, why are they holding me accountable type thing. So that was more where that was coming from. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying, and I completely agree that, like, yeah, we do want to have, I guess it's almost like the saying in sports where you don't want to leave it up to the judge to, you want to have clear rules. You don't want to have things that, end up subjective.
Don't leave it to the kicker in the fourth quarter. Get down there and get the touchdown.
Yeah, or like, when you're a football fan, right? Like,
Yeah, if it's a ball, I'm a fan.
okay. So like, this whole thing.
Except for
like,
pickleball. I'm not big into pickleball.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into that one. Like this whole, like, what is a catch? Like that phrase keeps happening.
Yep.
Like, what is a catch?
You got to catch 2 feet down, make a football move, or the ground cannot call.
What is pass interference? Like no one, I feel like no one knows these days. And so.
And I hate the people that say, you'll know it when you see it. I don't want to be like, have we gotten any better with these rulings, and sit down at nationals one year and be like, you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. And so along those lines, and you kind of mentioned like the whole, like how do we make solution, where are the solutions that can be had? And I think one thing that I think could be really good, and then this happens to some extent. I'm not sure if it happened in your situation. I feel like I remember you talking about like Joe came over and he immediately went and got Marcus. I don't know if they collaborated at all, but
no, not on this ruling. What happened was, and I think that Joe was naturally frustrated because I had gotten frustrated with my opponent.
Yeah.
And I'm the first one to say that I was operating out of extreme frustration, but it was not just the opponent here, but it was the couple of other instances in games where the take back culture showed up, or where players are just not conditioned to play in tempo. Yep. If someone has to tell you when you match up with somebody, you better make your turns fast because he's going to time you out. Like I don't find that that's okay, because I shouldn't have to change what I'm doing if I'm playing at an appropriate tempo already to avoid timeouts and things. But certain things had happened. I was frustrated. And again, I'm not going to say which player this was or anything, because that's irrelevant in moving forward and finding solutions. But analyzing the issues, there was a couple of other situations where just dumb things. Like I will sit here and say that I think that they were dumb things, because I would never think, oh, let me undo, like, just things that would never happen in any game that I've pretty much played. And this player, oh, I think I can. And you just, Joe, he thinks he can, and you explain it to him, and it almost feels comical to me having to explain why he wants to take something back that I don't think that there's even an avenue for. And all of the rulings up to the point that Marcus got involved had been exactly what I said. Like, they were ruled the way that I said that they would be ruled. Mm-hmm. And so Joe was coming over, but it was almost like he came over like 3 or 4 times, and it was like ticky-tack stuff to where it's like, guys, why are you calling me over? So I think when the other one came up and like I was probably visibly frustrated or whatever, I think Joe was, I think what it was I started to explain to Joe what the situation was. And I think at that point, he's just like, I'm out. Marcus, you're the head judge. Let him rule. And he stepped away. Or maybe he was within enough distance that if Marcus needed him or wanted to ask him or whatever, but he was not directly, they were not talking through the ruling. Marcus looked at it and kind of black and white agreed with my opponent that even though we had played the dominant, we had moved cards to discard pile. He had asked for to get to that point, he had asked for dominant initiative. It was accepted and all of that. His ruling was that you may on Fall of Man has to resolve. So it is sitting there open-ended, and he has to say, I'm doing it or I'm not doing it before you can move the game state forward. We both jumped the gun, he ruled, so we undo it. And so he was able to change his targets and turn a sure loss into a sure win.
Right.
And that's a huge momentum shift. And after all of the experience that I had, I was just fed up. Like, I can't win against the rule book, the judges, and the opponent. I'm playing Genesis, for goodness sakes. Like, if I was on clay, maybe I could overcome the odds. But Genesis is already up against the gun, no matter what Tyler says. They've got some cool tools and whatnot. They're not top tier. And I had played all season with that deck. Chad had offered me some insight, and I shared the list with him and worked on it. And it was kind of a fun little concept deck. It wasn't anything that was ever going to challenge to win, but I think I'm a good enough player that I should have still been in that like 10 to 15 range at nationals.
Yep.
And to feel like my chances were taken because of some of the just goofiness And I guess I can call it goofiness now because it is not sitting so heavy on me to where it's just like irritation and frustration thinking about it. But like when it says you may, I cannot make myself think that I have to sit there and ask them, are they doing that or not? When they say, may I play a dominant? May I have dominant initiative? I don't think that I have to sit there and say, no, your wages is begging for an answer. Is it yes or no?
Right.
Before we, like, you've chose to advance the game state, and I'm agreeing with that.
Yeah.
And so I explained, I know you listened to the last thing, and I probably told you this in the aftermath, but when he undid that, when Marcus said you can pick that up, he could have technically held on to that dominant then, because he would have won by the numbers, switching out the heroes that he discarded with getting rid of the higher number hero with wages. He didn't even have to play the dominant, and I didn't have anything to play. He didn't necessarily know that, but technically he could have won that and saved that dominant for a future turn.
Yeah, and I think, and kind of going back to what I would have liked to see, regardless of because there's things that are obviously right or wrong, with the rules. Marcus, is this character wilderness? That's a very clear, defined
black
thing.
And white.
Very black and white. And
or brown and white, technically, for the wilderness thing.
Yeah, good call out. When it's a situation like that, where we have things have been missed, things have been skipped, and we're talking about how do we fix this game state. I think that's a situation where I would like to see, at least 2, if not 3, depending on availability, judges kind of doing a little bit of collaboration almost and being like, okay, let's discuss this a bit. Like you see in sports, when there's something that is not 100% like black and white as far as like what the rule is, like get some.
They get together, they pick up the flag.
Exactly.
No penalty, or they have the radio in and they get the call from New York or whatever where they've reviewed it.
Like they ask each other, "What did you see? What did you see?" That's kind of how the referees do it in sport. Usually the head referee, especially if 2 guys have different views, it's like, okay, what did you see? What did you see? And then they piece it together. And I think that is, and this is something that, especially for like smaller tournaments and even like regionals, you might only have the host who is an experienced judge in some regions. It kind of depends on what region you are as far as that. So it may just be something that maybe starts with nationals, but just having the option for the judges to kind of do a little bit more like, okay, let's talk through this together. And, for one, that takes away the pressure from one person feeling like they have to get it completely right on their own. It takes away from any perceived, favoritism, like, oh, Marcus doesn't like John, so, he's never going to rule.
He probably doesn't at this point.
He's never going to rule in his favor. But no, I think Marcus is probably okay with you. Marcus is pretty chill guy, which makes him a great judge. But just being able to take away some of that perception or potential perception that like, oh, I don't want, this judge is gonna, screw it up for me every time. When you have that kind of 3 heads are better than 1 essentially type idea. So
piggybacking off of that and giving a little bit more context of the aftermath of the first ruling there in Type 1 at Nationals, Joe, after I was visibly upset, quit or whatever, and again, I didn't handle it right, but Joe, bless his heart, he came up to me and I'm visibly upset. Like I am heated. And he says, when you take a few minutes to calm down, if you have any suggestions on how we could handle that better and, for the future, how we could handle that better, let us know. And poor Joe, I think I snapped back on him pretty pretty good. Not like yelled at him or anything, but I had a strong tone, and I was like, nothing we do is going to matter. Nothing I say is going to matter if I can talk to other judges or elders, and in the moment they tell me that they would have ruled it differently, but no one will have that conversation with Marcus. Then it doesn't matter. If we're just going to default to Marcus, then it doesn't matter. And I ended up using the phrase, and not to anyone except for him, and I think Chris might have been nearby. And I was like, and the problem is that Marcus, right now, up there on that stage, because he was making a ruling for the live stream, I was like, Marcus is dead wrong. And if you guys know it, I'm paraphrasing because it's been so long, I don't know exactly how I worded it, but I know I said, Marcus up there on that stage right now is dead wrong. As like the follow up to the point, I was like, if you guys won't say something in the moment, then what is anything after the fact going to matter?
Mm-hmm.
And so where you're talking about talking, that would be great if we could get collaboration among judges to come to the most accurate ruling we can in the moment. I think that definitely has to be, we have to talk about like what the etiquette of that looks like, because say you get Joe to come over. In my situation, Joe comes over. And Joe gives a ruling. Is that just a natural thing to where he should notice sag off? Or when he gives me a ruling, do I say, hey, can we check that or whatever? And yep. I know that I've been one to push back on rulings and things. So I apologize for all those in the past. I'm going to try to be better in the future, but where's the process of that? And then those elders or people that are on the judging team for whatever day at nationals, they have to be willing to have a different opinion on a ruling, and not just because Marcus is saying it, just default to that's got to be accurate, or we're going to, and see, that's where you also get into, if someone's listed as the head judge at a certain point, it's their word that is final say. There's a lot of layers that need to happen and be developed to know how to handle that if you're going to start doing the collaboration idea. And I think it's a great idea, and I would love to see it. I would have loved to have been able to get the judges that were available to all talk right there and come to a thing. But in my case, I don't think it would have mattered, because it feels like there's a natural default to, oh, Marcus is right. Whatever Marcus says, that's right.
Yeah, and I think, kind of like the situation where you said, so you have one judge that gives you a ruling and you're still not sure. I know Jake used to be a judge for Magic. I never judged. I played a little bit. I know there is a process for appealing to, if you think that the judge that made the ruling for you was incorrect, that you're allowed to make an appeal, and ask for basically the next judge up, essentially, to, confirm the ruling or, discuss further, whatever it might be. So yeah, I think that's absolutely something that, that should be looked at. Again, especially
how many appeals would you get something like Magic? Do you know? Because you wouldn't want to create the habit of someone being able to appeal every call.
Oh, like how many do you get, like
right,
per tournament or whatever, per match?
Right.
Or,
I mean, because if the person's like appeal, then that's counterproductive for everything involved.
Right.
And that's not really in the true spirit of trying to ensure the most fair tournament experience. That's somebody just taking advantage. Yeah. One thing that I had, back to the sports references, I was thinking like you provide some kind of token potentially to players, and it's a appeal or challenge token. Drop the challenge flag.
The red challenge flag.
Yeah. And so you get a ruling, and you can turn that card, you can turn it in. And as long as, if they rule in your, like, if the ruling you got was wrong, you keep it potentially moving forward. But if you use it on one but then if you're stuck with not being able to potentially challenge something that's grotesquely wrong later, like where's the balance in something like that?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit more involved than we necessarily want to get.
Probably. I think I'm more interested in some kind of way of making it, I don't want to make it sound bad, but more black and white of how I should behave. So, like, clearly I have not behaved on rulings the way that I should, pushing back and all. Selfishly, I want to say that that's I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I'm not saying that I'm justified in any of it, but like when I get what I think is a bad ruling, like at nationals, I haven't told anyone that and they say, yeah, you were wrong. It's been the opposite of that. So this was something that I think most people, if they came over and gave it a second look or whatever, someone else was brought in and truly was open enough to share their thought and opinion judging it, I would have gotten a different ruling. But at the same time, being made aware of the fact that I have that habit of pushing back on a ruling and not wanting to continue down that path, where do I get off to where I can still make sure I get the right ruling, but I can do it in a more respectful manner and not make a judge feel like I am just pushing back to push back. You know what I mean? So it feels like there's got to be some kind of, definitely got to be a compromise for where I have been and where I want to be, but there needs to be something that's provided, you know, even if it's some kind of like on the tournament guidelines or whatever for players. Like we have all this that hosts are supposed to do. As a player showing up to a tournament, I've never seen anything that says how I can go and find out how I should do that if I get on the Cactus site and look into it and read between the lines.
Yeah, I think I'm remembering this right. So the host guide was redone a couple years ago, maybe several years ago. I don't remember now exactly, but if I remember right, I do think the original host guide also had language about appealing a ruling to a head judge. Like there was supposed to be a head judge and then, judges below that, kind of the base judges or whatever you want to call them.
Okay.
And I want to say that kind of language was in there. It may have been removed when we did the overhaul of the tournament guide because it wasn't something that felt maybe necessary. And, and maybe that's something to look at again. Clearly, maybe it is still in there. I have to look. Because we do, have an official head judge each day. Like they announce that at nationals, like,
right.
These are your judges. This is the head judge. And so, yeah, I think what it comes down to is just, we need to, for situations where there perhaps is some subjectivity where, a player has made a game rule violation, and obviously you can't put every single scenario in a tournament book or in a tournament guide of how that violation should be handled. That would be a document larger than the REG. So for situations like that, maybe there just needs to be some clarification or something kind of codified where, let's have at least two judges come together.
On the host guide, just so that we're operating with the information here.
Yeah.
In full clarity, it says under tournament officiating, 1, judges. Each category will be presided over by a judge who may be assisted by any number of additional judges as needed. A judge may be required to interpret rules and make other determinations during the tournament. Judges are not permitted to play in any of the categories that they are officiating. A judge may compete in a category that they are not officiating as long as each category has one qualified judge overseeing it who is not playing. Here we go. Here's the note section.
Mm-hmm.
Redemption, registered trademark, or whatever, the R with a circle, so it's official here, is a very complex game to judge. Said that right, Rob. Judges are to be well acquainted with the rules of play. Nevertheless, occasionally a judge may unintentionally rule contrary to official rules. All participants are reminded that redemption, are circled, tournaments exist primarily, what do you think it's about to say? To foster fun and fellowship. All players are expected to demonstrate patience toward one another, as well as good gamesmanship as befits a servant of Christ. Again, I've let people know I failed in that regard, but on here, it does not say anything that I can find about, appealing a ruling, or if you it just says that they may rule incorrectly. So do we just accept that as that's what it says black and white here? Or do we push for trying to respectfully get to a better ruling, the next section is number 2, violation of rules / cheating. We recommend that the host or judge make the following announcement prior to beginning the tournament, especially at a state, regional, or national tournament. And right there, at a state, regional, or national tournament. So we've already seen, we know that it is that way, but we see that they are handled with a little bit more officialness, if that makes sense, more of an official attitude towards the tournament structure of a state and up tournament. So we've differentiated. Rob, in his host guide here, has that separated. I think that's important to note. And then in quotation, the announcement that you should make before the tournament, it's sad that we must address this in a Christian game, but there have been instances of cheating, especially in the area of deck manipulation during shuffles and play. If you suspect your opponent is cheating in any way, please call a judge. If you suspect your opponent is not shuffling or cutting appropriately, ask a judge to step in, explain the concern, and have the judge shuffle both decks. Any violation of rules deemed deliberate can result in a warning or forfeiture of a game. So, and then it goes on to talk about if you're found to have an illegal deck and stuff like that. So, on this, obviously, we know why that was put in there for the double nickel situation. I assume, I don't know if it was in there before that, but I came after.
No, that was one of the situations that led to the overhaul of the host guide.
But it says, if you suspect your opponent is cheating in any way, let's go down a dark and gloomy path together here, brother.
Oh no.
What if I think my opponent is intentionally misplaying to get grace to do take backs? Because we talked about the option exists with the gray area in our rules. What if someone starts to intentionally take advantage of them? There's not really much in there except for if I think he's cheating, call the judge. And then it's left open-ended. Like, what does a judge, it talks about having the deck, both decks shuffled and things, but that's not the only kind of cheating, is not card manipulation and as far as the shuffle and draw and things.
Yeah.
But then it also is someone could rule and tell me it's black and white that you don't get a second chance at a ruling when a judge comes over and gives you that ruling. But I don't think that's the way we want our game to exist when people are spending literally thousands of dollars in a tournament season to go to tournaments and things.
Yep. So this actually reminds me, I kind of forgotten about this situation. But at Michigan Nationals a couple years ago, I was in a game.
It was Jay's fault.
No, Jay.
Sorry, Jay.
Jay was not involved this time. So I was in a game, and I had looked at my opponent's hand. I had used like a territory class, teaching in parables, I think, something to see their hand. So I was like 99.9% sure I knew exactly what they had. And I used the underdeck or the reserve ability. It was either teaching in parables or first sacrifice. So I
sounds like this is about to get juicy.
Well, a little bit. So that finished. I then kind of looked at my board. Okay, I know what they have. This is my best. I took a few seconds, just to kind of think through like what my best attack was based on what they had in their hand, and proceeded to go to battle. And my opponent blocked with the deceiver, which I am like, again, 99.9% sure that I did not miss a deceiver in the hand.
That's like the thing.
That's pretty much
that's
the
only
only
thing you get rid of.
Exactly, yeah. And I certainly did not make, when I started thinking about what my rescue was going to be, I was not, I don't remember if he had any other characters in his hand. But, as I was thinking, like, okay, if I do this, then his best block is this. If I do this, his best block, that type of thing. Where it's like with the deceiver, it's like, okay, well, he's got any block he wants. Like, why would I even think about, how he's going to block when I have no idea how he's going to, go from there, blocking the deceiver. So I was like, what just happened? And I think I'm pretty sure I ended up winning the game. And then after the game, I went up to Gabe and I said, hey, this is what happened. Again, is it possible the card like stuck together and like was hidden behind one of the cards, and I just didn't like fan his hand out enough when I was looking at it, or I couldn't say that for like I didn't like go through the cards one by one and like making sure like they weren't.
Look, you've been playing this game a long time, but let me give you a little piece of advice I've picked up on.
Okay.
I manually count the cards when I'm looking at someone's hand, when I'm taking a mental like picture of it.
Yeah.
Like they say, like generally you can ask throughout the turn or whatever, how many cards in hand, and they'll 10, 9, 6,
Yep.
whatever it is, random number. Whenever I'm looking at it, one of the things I'm doing as I'm going through is individually. Most of the time, sometimes I'm just looking for a specific, do they have something to stop me?
Well, and that's what I was doing.
But most of the time, I make it a point to count physically the cards so that
Yep.
later on, if like cards are played on the table, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'm more into it and tracking that, and then sometimes I just don't have the mental capacity for it. But
Right. And and in the moment, I don't think because again, in the moment, I was like, I was questioning myself to start. It's like, did I really miss that? Like, did I just completely overlook that when I was like, maybe I was, I don't remember exactly what card I put away from the ability. And I was just like, because I couldn't 100% remember in my mind that I definitely did not see that card. That's why I didn't say anything in the moment. So, like I said, after the game was over, I went up to Gabe and I said, "Hey, it felt like something, was going on, and the only other part of it was the opponent at times was holding his hand beneath the table, like his hand of cards, physically, like, putting them beneath the table, looking at them.
that should be a permanent no codified somewhere."
Right. And I think at one point I did say something like, "Hey man, you need to keep your hand above the table." I feel like I said that at some point in the game, but yeah, when I was kind of explaining that, it kind of made a little more sense. Like, oh, maybe there was, something had happened there. So I told Gabe, I said, I feel like this happened. I can't be 100%, and he just said, okay. He made a note to the player and said, I will watch to see if something like that, basically kind of keep a closer eye on that player in future games. I don't know if anything else happened. I don't think Gabe ever, followed up with me to say like, oh yeah, I saw something or I didn't see something. I'm guessing he would have if something had happened that they caught or, observed. So I think, like, to me, that's kind of, we don't want to be in a situation where we are pointing the finger at someone unless you are 100% certain.
Right.
I think
and
that.
Also, I think another layer is I don't want to sit down and have a negative expectation of the opponent or whatever.
Right. Yep.
I want to, let's have a neutral, this is where we're starting from, a neutral area. But I think there's work to be done to make sure that both players are understanding the rules in a kind of similar manner and things to where we eliminate some of that potential for trepidation. So like, let me just ask you this, and you be as honest as you can with me.
Okay.
Had you lost that game, would you have handled it any differently? Because I know you would have felt differently. That's just human nature. If I had lost and not overcame the thing that I thought was potentially a slight of hand, that obviously you have internal different feelings, but how would you, and that's the thing is, the reason I asked that is like, I don't know if you knew that it was 100% and you could call it in the moment. I don't even know exactly how they would handle that. Like if you said, I looked at his hand, he didn't have deceiver, now he has deceiver, and you were adamant about it. I don't know that we have it set up well to where, and Gabe is a strong-minded person. He's been around the game for a long time. Maybe he operates kind of taking the bull by the horn, so to speak, but I'm not sure that, if you called Joe over and explained to him, someone that has judged at just about every nationals I've been to. Actually, I think every nationals I've been to has been involved as a judge. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, but I think this is the perfect example of where, like, if I had been 100% sure, if I had literally gone, one by one, counted the cards, made sure that there was no cards like sticking behind each other, whatever, like literally laid his hand out on the table to analyze it. And then he picks his hand back up, maybe his hand slips under the table, and then suddenly when I go to rescue, a deceiver blocks that I had not seen. If I had been 100%, I would have called it out in the moment. That much I know for sure. And then I feel like, based on what you just read, that, first, I think there needs to be a discussion amongst the judges, which is what happened when there was the situation many years ago. That was a judge's
double nickel.
The judges definitely discussed that, and I think that if I had, again, in this situation, if something like where I was 100% sure and called it out, they would have discussed, and my expectation, based on what you just read, would have been an automatic game loss for the opponent, and then potentially, and this is maybe where the judges could say, it's a game loss, potential disqualification, but not necessarily automatic disqualification. I think that's where you could have a little bit of, everyone makes mistakes. Sometimes they decide to make that mistake intentionally. And, for me, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for the player to be disqualified. He would certainly be, if it happened again, then yeah, I'm definitely, I guess what I'm saying is I'd be okay with second chances, with a second chance.
Okay.
And,
but the reason that I posed it to you specifically is because we talked about that you've seen it from the elder side or whatever. So I was just trying to get a read on, obviously we don't want anyone to cheat or do anything that's blatant. But I'm trying to figure out, based on what we just read there, it seems like the host guide, being the only source for information on that, kind of leaves a lot of it up to the individual. And I didn't read through all the way, but
I think, and that's where the collaboration needs to happen. For a game loss situation, there should definitely be game loss or beyond. So, game loss or disqualification, there should be discussion amongst the judges. Now, it might be perfectly obvious what needs to be done. If someone's blatantly cheating and, it's, there's evidence and it's been witnessed, it should be kind of a no-brainer, but it should still be discussed amongst the judges. And that was what happened, when the incident was actually caught on camera. They still came together as judges and discussed and made sure, yep, is this what you're seeing? Yep, is this what you're seeing? Type of thing. I wasn't involved as a judge, but I was kind of given the summary of what happened, being, part of the elder team during that time. So kind of going back to your original question of how I would have felt if I had lost, I'm pretty sure I still won that battle. And then I know I still won the game. I think I would have handled it the same, only because in that moment I decided not to say something. Now, if I had brought it up right in that moment and my opponent was like, no, I had it the whole time, you just didn't see it, then that probably would have made me a little more, and I don't even remember if maybe I did. I feel like I made some kind of offhand comment, not mean, but almost
I wish I had seen that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something like that, where it's oh, did I miss that? And I think my opponent just didn't say anything or something. And so I don't know. It felt wrong. It felt like something happened. But again, I never want to point a finger unless I'm 100% sure.
I think having kind of the murky feelings that I have with the game is just, and I'm asking kind of almost like they almost probably feel like gotcha questions, like like I'm trying to get you to say the wrong thing. Or I'm genuinely curious about how other people approach what I see as a lot of gray area in interactions with the player face to face when you're playing the game. But then there's also the gray area in the rules, and then you have the ability for those to kind of combine, like they did for me at Nationals, to where players thinking that they can do takebacks and things, and the rulings don't alleviate that because it doesn't say one way or the other, even to the point to where Marcus came over, ruled, and I feel like I got 100% an incorrect ruling. And I'm not saying that to just be confrontational with it. Still, I'm saying that I 100% believe that. I can't make myself see it from the other side, because at that point it's like what I said with Jake on the last episode, to where if there's a shield there and I search, how long do I sit here and wait for them to trigger that? Do I have to just explicitly say, are you going to do that or not, so that I can move on to my next game action and things like, and I don't think we want to go down that road, because while we talked about early on the improvement in the game over the last several years with card design, cleaning things up, the rules getting improved and things, and the game is in a much better state than, I mean, it's a far cry from what it was when I first started. And it was, the card pool got smaller with rotation, and then it's starting to grow again, with some of these sets that have come out since rotation and things. And obviously we've been able to maintain the one set a year for the last several years. GOC was kind of a influx thing because it was 2 phases or whatnot, but cards have steadily entered the card pool, and they've maintained kind of that same expectation of this is what a card's going to be moving forward. So all of that's cleaned up, but even in that, the downside that I see is that we've reduced the gap between. So you sit down to play an RLK. RLK's got a competent deck now because of the card design and the cards that are made available and things. So everybody's got a deck that can win most of the time. Given the right situation, circumstances, it can win.
Yeah.
And so the only way to differentiate yourself is to know your deck like the back of your hand, so that you can get to your lines of play and play without, making misplays and things. And if you work and try to hold yourself to that standard, but then it's not applied to necessarily the opponent that you're playing at a given time because they do takebacks or whatever, they're used to being able to do that, or they don't play up to tempo. I think my issue with it and how important it is to try to understand all of the variables and then find the best solution for situations moving forward, or even if it's just better understanding, because some of these things may not need anything to change. It may just need to be that we understand each other a little bit better. And I think talking is a big part of that. So hopefully somebody sees the value in having these conversations. But I think as the decks have gotten closer, the only way to differentiate is by the skill gap that a player has. And if we're removing the skill gap by allowing takebacks or not enforcing things that feel to me like black and white, and then we still compound it with like the gray area. And if our approach to the gray area things is always fun and fellowship or whatever, or we're going to give grace, then I can't show that I'm a better player than my opponent because X, Y, and Z is stacked against me potentially in a certain game. I'm not saying that every game's like that, because not every game is like that. But when that does happen, I feel like the player that's, from my perspective, the player that I would be in that given situation. And like when you are playing, you should be able to feel that you are getting a clear and fair opportunity. Any of those sticky situations that, we've talked about, it's hard to really get a grasp on how far reaching it is. But I don't know where the best place to start. I think you've obviously collaboration among judges, I think is an important thing. Being able to potentially appeal a judgment and maybe having that codified in the rules. But I think it would need to be to where if we're going to codify it to where you can reach out to the head judge, then the head judge can't be making base level judgment. That's got to be reserved for, you got a judgment from someone else. Otherwise, Marcus ruled this. Now I want to get, he is the head judge. I don't get a second. Like that becomes potentially something. But I think the main point that I have moving forward, especially as we get ready to transition into tournaments, is what do you think is the best way? So right now we're going to operate this tournament season as is. There's not going to be anything that changes and swings things one way or the other, or we're not going to get, I won't say we won't get any, but I wouldn't expect any real clarity on any of these gray area situations now that we're this close to tournament season launching and things. So when a situation happens, so my situation at Nationals, imagine that happens at a state tournament here coming up in a couple months. What do you think the best approach is, or what do you think would be a good way to shine a light on the issue? This is what happened. And then work towards a path and pattern for follow-up, being that you have experience with the elder team and things, because I think my biggest concern is still the fact that I didn't get what I thought was adequate follow-up and closure to the situation. Like you mentioned, reporting that to Gabe at that tournament there in Michigan, and he didn't follow up with you. So you just assumed that nothing. But I feel like that could have potentially been better for you if he just walked up. I kept an eye on him and I never saw anything. And then, okay. And I don't know if that really moves the needle for you or anything. And I'm not trying to say that Gabe handled anything incorrectly. I'm just saying, what is a reasonable expectation here when a situation arises that we can report and have potential adequate follow-up from the player side?
Yeah, I think, like, as far as what can be done for this season, like I think, or I would hope that there's maybe a little more emphasis on the collaboration thing for this year's Nationals. Obviously that they figure out who's judging each day. Then, they might have a judge that's more designated for teams, a judge that's more designated for sealed, or, obviously Type 1 is just its own day. I feel like that's something would be fairly simple to implement. And I don't think it needs to, like you said, it's tricky, like when you've got kind of the head judge, and what if the head judge makes an incorrect ruling, or what, appears to be an incorrect ruling. Maybe there needs to be some kind of mechanism for a player to say, hey, can you just, verify that? Yeah, I don't know exactly what that looks like. And it's actually been quite a few years since I've been an official judge for Nationals. That's actually another team story where there was a year that I had won both Type 2 categories, and so they made me judge on day 3 when I wanted to play teams. And the player who took my place, they ended up winning. So, there was that. So yeah, I feel like I have another team's title. It's just kind of unofficial, but anyway, so yeah, it's been several years since I've judged, but just having kind of a more clarified system of like how judges, again, handle the situations that are not black and white, where it's not just I'm going to appeal that you say this guy is not a disciple. Well, it's like, no, you don't get to appeal that. Like, that's a very black and white thing. I think another thing that could potentially be looked at is, and I'd have to see if I don't think there's been anything codified, but when it comes to like missed triggers, like how do we handle those? I know in the past there's been, I want to say there's been some things where it's like if a card has a bunch of May abilities and you move past them, that the assumption, the default is that you have declined all of them. Now, in the case of your game, where you had the Wages of Sin, where it says you may do this, or this, and it doesn't say like you have to. How did I word
it?
It
doesn't give you like a default, or you can do this instead option.
Right, like
everything is optional on the card.
Well, and I guess I don't know if this was how or what the reason Marcus was going off of, but it doesn't, like, it says, it almost implies that you have to do one. Like, you may do any of them. Like, it may be this, or this. It doesn't really specify that not choosing is also a valid option.
Okay, but what about you may draw 2 on a card? You may draw X or whatever. It doesn't give me multiple options, and it doesn't say I have to choose one. So in that same line of thinking, that should just say draw X or draw 2. Why is there a you may if the option isn't to do that thing or to not do that thing?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So back in the day, one of the first cards that kind of had that, where it kind of came up, was Reach of Desperation. You may interrupt the battle, draw 3, and play the next enhancement. And the way that was interpreted was the card reads, you may interrupt the battle, you may draw 3, you may play the next enhancement. Because there would be times where you would not want to interrupt the battle, or you would not want to draw 3. And so it was always kind of, there might be times where you want to not interrupt the battle, but you did want to draw 3, and you did want to play the next enhancement. Or did want to interrupt the battle, you didn't want to draw 3. So there was so you could pick and choose each ability. Whereas that was what was implied. And now with Wages of Sin, where now we play with, the card plays as written, it says, you may do this or this or this. It's not you may do this, or you may do this, or you may do this. So it's coming at it from one of these has to be done. You just get to choose which one you're doing. I don't know if that was Marcus's logic. That is the only logic that I could come up with.
I would assume that is, but I still can't make myself, when looking at this card, it says you may take an evil card that has a discard ability from deck or reserve. So you choose to do that. When you play this card, you get to choose whether to do the ability or not. I mean, that's kind of the way that enhancements work, right? Generally, if I were to play this and I didn't want to take, maybe I didn't want to take a card from deck, I could choose not to do and trigger a quote unquote search, but I wanted to potentially discard a hero in battle and just use it like a battle winner. I could choose to not do the first one at all, not trigger a potential search counter, and then I can choose to use it as a battle winner. So I think I would say that probably 95% of players have operated that it's completely optional to carry out either or both of the abilities. Each ability singularly, like each one is an optional. You can do this, and then you can do this set of. And I think that's how it's naturally been played. And it makes sense that way. It's intuitive that way to me. I can't see it from the other side, to where when a player plays that and then says, can I play dominant initiative, and plays the dominant that they searched for, that they did not, in that sequence of event, imply that they were not doing the second part of it.
Yeah. And I'm, and just to clarify, I'm not agreeing with the way that it was ruled. That's just the only way that I could.
Right. And so I think that's a healthy thing to do, is to try to understand it from that way. And trust me, I've racked my brain on it. I just can't. And maybe it's the fact that the negative experience is so strong in my memory, but I can't make myself, I've hosted a few tournaments now, a couple of state tournaments and things. And I helped judge at Kentucky State last year, which was a pretty big tournament. And if someone asked me, it wouldn't even be a question that you have to do that. You have to do one of the 3 options. So I just naturally can't make myself see it from that side, but I think it is healthy to try to understand where that ruling might have came from, so that you can see the differences in your own logic, or how I see it and how he sees it. In this situation, and again, it might just be scar tissue that's in the way.
I feel like that's probably part of it. But
I can't bridge the gap between the 2 lines of thinking.
Yeah, no, I see, I see what you're coming from. And I can pretty confidently say that, if I had been in your position, I would have been pretty frustrated as well. Like I know myself. I'm pretty competitive, and when I feel
pretty competitive,
pretty competitive.
Do you remember Mr. Classic the first time, that booster draft, where what was it? I told you that you should just give me the first one or whatever it was. I was like, first one's free, right? Or something along those lines. And you said, and I quote, it was kind of a cool quote, "They must not have told you I'm from Minnesota."
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And then you ended up losing because you swung to the wrong person. You remember what was it?
No,
Panic Demon, I think.
Yeah, I think
it was something where he could chain together evil characters, and he ended up blocking you by the numbers. And then my turn, he passed the turn to me, and I just attacked Gabe, and he gave me the soul for free.
Yeah. No, I do remember that. Yeah,
I put, "They must not have told you I'm from Minnesota," right up there with "Sit down and shuffle up." Like those are two good redemption quotes to go on the senior yearbook.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, I'd forgotten about that, but that is a good memory. I do remember that now that you brought it up. So, but yeah, I'm pretty competitive. So I think I once flipped a game board after a game was finished. Not my proudest moment.
You were just trying to imitate Jesus?
No.
Except for it wasn't Money Changers. It was Monopoly, wasn't it?
No, it was Scrabble. My brother had just absolutely destroyed me in a game of Scrabble and wanted to take a picture of the board, and I was just not having it in that moment. I was like, nope, we're destroying the evidence. Again, not my proudest moment. I'll own that one, and he still I guess he hasn't really brought it up, but once in a while it comes up, and it's like, oh yeah, remember that time, Justin?
You remember that game? You're that guy? Yeah. Oh, you're going to be that guy that flips the table?
But yeah, no, I remember getting frustrated at one of Gabe's tournaments a couple of years ago, where I was convinced that Gabe was wrong on a ruling that he made, and it turned out in the end that I had just had a completely misunderstood how something worked, and he kind of had to, because I wasn't really letting it go, and I thought I was completely in the right, and it was not a basic understanding, but like kind of a
more on the fundamental level.
Yeah, a fundamental thing that I thought was one way and was actually not, and part of that may have just stemmed from kind of being out of the game a little bit for a couple years there, and I don't, maybe it was something that got changed or tweaked along the way, but it had to do with the hero abilities resolving when you've got like multiple heroes coming into battle, and where like you got a bunch of abilities on heroes, and my understanding at the time was they have to you choose the order of heroes, and then you do the order's abilities on each hero, where no, it's actually you take all the abilities and they all have to fall in line on the order of resolution. So you could have hero A has an ability, and then it later has a second ability, but if that second ability falls
brings
lower,
a character in, it falls to the bottom of the
Yep.
And then all those get stacked, and when you get to that level, now you can choose the order of those abilities.
Correct. Yep.
That was a rude awakening of like how technical it can be, and how not really super clear it was when Love at First Sight was a combo deck, because you would grab all these Genesis heroes and throw them down, and you've got tons of heroes that search and band and stuff.
Yep.
And it started off to where it was like, okay, I'm going to do this one first, this one next, that one. Players would make you set out the order. And so you would get used to setting out the order. But then if a judge tells you, well, no, you don't bring that hero in just yet, you have to wait till the end, but it messes up like your line of play.
Yep. And that was,
it was a constant, like that year of playing that deck, and the time after, tinkering around with it in Classic after rotation happened. That one will teach you that fundamental really, element really quick.
Yeah, and those were the year of that Love at First Sight, circus deck. That was the year that I wasn't really around a whole lot. And I think that was leading up to Iowa Nationals.
And so that got replaced with, shortly after Love at First Sight, they got rid of that, and then Ephesian Widow dropped and was like, life in the sun, homie.
Yep. So like I said, kind of going back to it, I remember, being at one of Gabe's tournaments and kind of having my mind blown a little bit about that. But, and again, not one of my prouder moments where I kind of let the frustration of the moment, like I didn't, leave the game or anything, or just, but I,
you're going to throw shade at me because I've been away for 6 months. I got it. I didn't leave the game or anything.
Oh, I mean, I've left the game a couple times, but it was always more just other life stuff, which is also true for you. But I know. I mean, I didn't like. I think I was just frustrated, and I wouldn't let it go. I was like, Gabe, are you sure? Like, how can this possibly? And he was like, Justin, I gave you the ruling. That is how it works. Like, shut up and play. Essentially, like, he didn't say shut up and play, but that was kind of what.
He told you to sit down and shuffle up next round.
Yeah, basically. And so like I said, I'm fairly confident that had I been in your situation, I would also have felt that frustration. And so I don't think you're, like you said, you've owned it. You've, admitted that you did not handle it the best. I'll be the first to say that, I probably would not have handled it, any better than you. So I don't, there's no judgment coming from this side.
Cool. I will say though that, and I guess I should thank anyone that's listened to the last podcast and will be listening to this one. Hopefully they haven't turned it off by the time they get to this point, but I guess maybe I should send everyone a bill that's listening to it, because it's almost like a little bit of therapy for kind of the whatever funk you want to call.
Mm-hmm.
What I felt with the game afterwards, like I'm definitely of the mindset that I want to completely reconcile that and move forward. And I think that it almost feels like we're talking a little bit in an echo chamber, to where I'm just going over it again and talking about different gray area and things. And maybe it's slightly moved past the point of being productive to keep rehashing. If that's the case, and I missed that, I promise I'm not going to keep pounding it on the desk for like the next year or anything, but I'm still trying to work through that. And I really do think that finding a way for us to create a little bit better of an expectation for both leadership and players when rulings happen. And, we talked about it here. I guess we should get ready to wrap this up. You're coming up on a John Early episode, almost 3 hours here, but, I think the important thing, and I guess the main point of this conversation that I will walk away with, is I think, especially coming from your side with, an established bit of experience with both the elder side and the player side, and especially you being a pretty competitive person by all accounts, if you'll throw Scrabble across the room. I think having an open mind to work on the solutions, not just talk about. That almost sounds bad. Not just talk about them, but be willing to, I have to be willing at some point to set this aside and give an opportunity for things to improve, instead of just holding on to hurt and frustration and anger and all of that. Yep. And I think I'm getting, I think I'm getting there. But it is still something that weighs heavy on me, not as heavy as it was before in getting to share it and things. So if anyone is this episode is just rehashing and going over the same thing, I really do want to be forward focused and looking at the potential solutions. And I think you bringing up collaboration among the judges, I think that's a good step. I think also finding some way to, record the events of a bad situation that happens or occurs at nationals, and then having some kind of follow up on that, how we're going to do that, potentially codifying or coming up with the etiquette of how we're going to request rulings at a tournament, and then if we have still some reservation or pause on whether we think we got the right ruling, how do we approach that? Was there anything else big that you just wanted to highlight here before we get ready to wrap up?
I don't think so. Like, I think, yeah, we talked about, you kind of summed it up there, and I think it's as long as we're moving forward, I think that's just we certainly don't want to take steps backwards. We don't want to just stay where we're at, because that, then we're just going to have this conversation again in 2 years when another thing happens, and so, what can we do? What can we try? And there might be something that we try and it doesn't work, maybe, but as long as we're taking steps in the right direction, I think that, for you or anyone who feels like they kind of got, shorted on a ruling or, a situation that happened, that's all you really want to see. And, you talked about this in the last episode, like, you're not looking for someone to, bow at your feet and say like, oh yeah, you were right. Like, that's not going to help anything.
Selfishly, in the weeks that followed Nats, that would have made me feel pretty good. Again, that's the selfish pride that we talked about last episode, not the good kind of pride.
Right.
But yes.
Yeah. Like, so what can we do to make sure that, nationals is a positive experience, again, kind of going back to the very first thing we talked about, like the judges are human. They make mistakes. The elders are human. They're going to make mistakes. We are there's a lot of different views and things, so things are going to happen where people aren't going to feel great about what happened or how it was handled. Like, that's just kind of that's life. I mean, that's, really, when you think about it, pleasing everyone all the time in every situation is just not reality. So the important thing is to take steps forward, to try and look at what can we do to hopefully prevent some of these situations, so that they're less likely to happen, or they happen less often. And I think that's all that we can really hope for, and or expect, especially from a team that is volunteers and, is taking time out of the rest of their lives to keep this game going.
I guess I should probably be one of the ones to probably stand and bang the drum for the elder team and things, considering obviously with this experience, I have kind of the negative side of it, but I've also been a big benefactor of being, with the podcast here, but also being in close proximity with Tyler and Chris, from just a regional standpoint, being able to go to tournaments with them. I've had access to the elder team in ways that a lot of people don't. So I've seen a lot of the inner workings a little bit more than others. And it almost, again, slaps me in the face with the reality of, I didn't treat Marcus with the kind of respect that he should have gotten in the moment or whatever. And again, that how I acted is never going to be okay. But the situation that, I won't say caused it, because it's not the only thing. It was that on the heels of all the other stuff. Mm-hmm. That's not going to be okay either. But as for all the negative light that maybe I've put on the elder team, I think I should also probably be one of the ones to talk about all the positives of what they've done, because I've seen and I've been able to have an ear to throw out suggestions to the elder team about, hey, this would be a cool thing. And then seeing down the road, potentially those things come into the game and whatnot, and knowing that they're volunteers and things, is even more impressive of what they have been able to accomplish, even in just my 6 years of being involved in the game. Yep. Coming up on 7 at some point this year, after Nats, but seeing the confusing state of the game when I came in, of like, there was the haves and the have-nots. And if you haven't been playing for 5 years already, you're the have-not. Nothing you can do to really bridge the gap, because It was the card pool, it was deck building, it was all of that layered, plus the nuances of being a good player that you don't really pick up on until you've been in the game for enough time to get enough experiences to where you almost earn your stripes by being, I wasn't a random little kid. I was a random unknown adult person that came into the game, but you still have to put in you got to take your losses on the chin and things early on. But for any negative light that I've shared on our cast on the elder team for the frustration of what happened at nationals and the lack of follow up, by the same token, they've done a lot of great things. And so it's just a matter of understanding where potentially my negative experience falls on their priority chart and not reading into it a little too much, which I think I did initially, where I mentioned that I tried to take my hurt and throw it at Chris and Tyler and be like, I thought we were boys. Like, what is happening here? Like, why did you guys let this happen? And why have I not heard anything about it? And I think just understanding and compartmentalizing like all the different facets of the game, and then understanding that they have to be involved in each almost equally, to where like they have to touch so many things, and there's only what is it, like 6 people?
Yeah, I don't know officially where like at least when I was a part of it, like, like I said, there was kind of a core group of 4 to 5, and then there was some that were elders, but maybe not quite as hands-on,
right.
Still a part of discussions, but kind of maybe a part of the broader discussions and not some of the really
like for this issue, I can't be mad at Roy because I got a wrong ruling.
Right. Yeah.
Roy's more of the, like he's going to carry the torch of trying to grow the game. Always keep a starter deck.
That's right.
So if anybody has felt like the past 2 recordings here have been negative, just know that if it has, it's been part of a healing process that is ongoing. And all I can say is that it's ongoing, and I'm going to attempt to be better in the future. And I'm going to trust that sharing these concerns and things is going to help leadership and other players also be better moving forward. Again, not justifying any of my actions. I was completely wrong. I guess in that regard, I'm kind of a walking failure, but aren't we all? That's kind of the condition of the human element. We are not perfect, and that's okay to not be perfect, because we're not called to be. Mm-hmm. So anybody listening, if you are on the elder team, you guys are listening. Again, I do want to share that I do have extreme gratitude for what you have done for the game and the improvements in the game and things. And I'm trying to work on getting all the way back reconciled with it and being excited about the future of the game moving forward. And hopefully we're on the path. And this isn't just talking in an echo chamber I guess it's important to focus on as we continue to talk about these, is that it doesn't slant towards like self justification or self glorification to I was right and someone else was wrong, and had that ruling gone this way, then this might have been the outcome or anything like that. So I've tried to make sure that I keep those far away from, because that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, no, I think it's and for you specifically, and the reason, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you here, but if
that's a dark hole, brother.
where I can certainly understand where you're still feeling some of that and still processing is because in the back of your mind you still have that thought of well, what if this happens again? And what about the next time? And so that's why, like you said, I think it's so important that, as long as we're taking steps forward, that is going to be the key to just feeling or even that if it does happen again, you feel okay, something else happened, maybe similar, maybe different, but I know that
how is the follow-up going to be different?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You saying that, and that is honestly a big thought. That's why I have decided that apart from maybe teams, if Keegan twists my arm behind my back, I'm not planning on playing anything at nationals, even though I could probably squeeze a day of something or whatever. I do want to be available for, helping Brian host and things, because I know Jaden's going to want to play all 3 days and things of that nature. And that's fine. But part of the reason that I don't want to push to actually play is I don't want to be put in that situation again and have it potentially repeat before I've calloused over the previous experience, if that makes sense. And it might sound almost like a grab like I'm trying to just say this because it sounds good, but I really do think about new players coming to the game. Like there was a gentleman that came to the game last year or to nationals last year. He said that someone had told him about the event and he just showed up and he was walking around on the last day and just wanting to observe the game best he could. I ended up, even after the frustration of the day before, I was the one that took lead on walking around and telling him about the game and things. And I don't need any accolades for that or anything. But now I think mentally about the experience that I had. What if he showed up to play, or someone in his situation, first time they sit down and something like that goes against them? For the most part, I feel like they just walk away and never play the game again. Yeah. Or that's a potential outcome. And we don't want that. So how do we get as far from that as possible? And I think using the situation as kind of a springboard to continue to progress forward on the rulings, cleaning up the gray area, even all the way down to the local play group level of making sure you're holding yourself accountable to not, getting accustomed to take backs and things, I think is important. And all of that, as all of those issues that I talked about at nationals layered to give me the frustrating, the day that it was, or weekend that it was, all of those were layered to make it such a big deal. If we take little things and we layer it as, this isn't a full solution on its own, but it's a step in the right direction, and we do that enough, we layer enough things to where it all hits in a way that makes the situation better when it happens again down the road, to where you don't have that, oh, here we go again. And I think that's the biggest step, is at some point seeing some kind of real tangible, benefit of these conversations, leading to the removal of that trepidation of, I'm sitting down to play a game. Is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? But I think you did it. I think we're going to, at least on the raw recording here, we're going to cross the 3-hour mark. So that confirms that you are kin, even if it's just by marriage, to Mr. John Early. So
we did it. We did it, fam. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, maybe not the last time that, we talk about this on an episode, but, hopefully the last time that it takes the whole episode, because I am hoping for the return of the top 10.
Like I asked you earlier, if you didn't win, would you still feel that way? But yeah, the top 10 is fun, even if it's not accurate. I mean, because it's just us coming up with almost what feels like an arbitrary list of top 10, but it's kind of cool. And it's a way to engage with people. I want to get back to doing all the cool segments. Community mailbag, that'd be cool. I always like that one because you never know where the questions are going to go. Yeah. And then Jake, whenever he gets into his little bag of like, I came up with this card and it like kills everything that you have in your hand, but at the end of it, you get to do this. Like the mad scientist is unlocked and all of that, which if you stick around and keep up with those promo cards that we made and we'll be sharing images of, there is a mad scientist card. There's definitely a mad scientist card and it looks fantastic. It's Jake, but extra cartoony Jake. It's fantastic.
Cool.
So I guess we will get ready to wrap up here. Definitely want to thank you for joining. And again, like I said before, reaching out and being willing to be a kind of a deflector of my negative emotions or somebody that I could talk to and kind of decompress those feelings.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. Glad we got to do this. And as like you said, as someone who's been kind of on both sides of situations like that, in my, what is this, coming up on 28 years-ish of playing, probably closer to 20, 26 or 25 playing in tournaments. Like, yeah, it's, these things happen, and the thing we've got to do is just try to improve. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. Happy we got to have this conversation. Happy to share a few stories, talking about the good old days, a little bit.
You really took it back. Back in 2004, there was a combo deck.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, I've got plenty of stories. There's lots more where that came from, but we'll save those for some other episodes. And yeah, for
have sure. to add you to the frequent flyer list.
Ooh, there we go. Yeah, I mean, because. Well, Jaden never invites me on his unless we're playing a game, so I don't know. Like,
he can be that way. He wants to keep the limelight to himself.
Well, it's because I beat him most times that we play on his stream.
I lose to him most times, so I guess that's why I get invited and not you.
Maybe that might be it. Yeah, he's beaten me plenty of times.
Well, we definitely have some things to look forward to featuring you, whether you join for an episode before Nationals or not, because you are locked in, after we talked about earlier, to be the host of Live at the Venue Fantasy Draft. And we've also got some cool ideas we kind of used last year as a bit of a learning experience for that. So I'm excited about some of the ideas we came up with, like having the daily lineups and things like that. A lot of cool things.
Definitely looking forward to that.
All right, well, I guess we'll get ready to end here. Thank you again for joining. Thanks for listening, guys. And we'll catch you later. Peace.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Threshing Floor Podcast. Help us grow our community by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're at it, be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss the next episode. And we'll talk to you next time on the Threshing Floor Podcast.